Alrighty. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to say this is quite a sight to be watching all of you watching us today. Thank you so much for making the time to join us on this delightful spring afternoon in Cape Town. I would like to start by, after thanking all of you for joining us, I'd like to start thanking all of our collaborators on this glorious event. So as you would have noticed, Workshop 17 is this fantastic collaborative space in which we're sitting today. We've also partnered with TEDxCapeTown, with Alex introducing herself shortly. And as you may also know, we are the Graduate School of Business, UCT's business school, just up the stairs from here. And this is our annual Business for Tomorrow conference. The theme this year is Leading with Agility. And the promise, well, what we're trying to achieve today is to provide you with new ways to look at the environments in which you operate on a daily basis, and to give you tools to become more agile and more effective leaders in your professional life and in your personal lives. Now, before I pass on to Dr. Timothy London, I would just like to make a shout out to an MBA alumni by the name of Mark, who shortly after graduating in 2015 started a company called Migro. And Migro is all about measuring and finding and providing tools to enable emotional intelligence measurements. So as we know, companies are very well documented from a financial point of view, but we've struggled for many, many years now to actually give some measure to the human capital that we have and how we can leverage and get the most out of the people that are working for us and with us, because at the end of the day, without people, organizations are nothing. So we've got this fantastic experience happening downstairs. On top of that, we've been informed that everybody has a 1-month subscription to the platform should they wish to sign up. And I invite you all to come and check it out during the recess, which will be happening after our second speaker. Now, without any further ado, Dr. Tim London.
That better be for him. So, I hate using microphones. My voice carries, as my students in the audience know. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Tim London. I am on the faculty here at the GSB. I teach leadership stuff, so it makes sense that I'm here. I'm always really happy to do these types of events. It's always great to see what our students can put together in the midst of doing an incredibly demanding MBA degree. They somehow manage to do these amazing events as well. So I just want to, as a tip of the cap, kudos to them for doing all of this. So this is in addition to everything else. So it is really an accomplishment that they've done this. I'm not going to stay up here too long, because it's not about me. For the first time in a while, it's not about me. But I did just want to say welcome. I said if you're not from the GSB, if you're not part of the student group and you're interested in talk to our students, you'll find out what great students we have. We're quite interested to talk to you about the GSB, but I think this is a really good example of what we're hoping to do at the GSB in terms of turning out really engaged, really bright students. So. Last thing that I'll say before I introduce Alex, and they've taken it down now, they're setting me up, is the hashtag for today is Lead with Agility 18. What we're going to do at the end of today's event is to have a panel discussion. We're going to try to take questions from that are tweeted out to us. So this is the most modern thing I've done in a while, so bear with me. But so if you've got a question or a comment that comes up during today's session, please just tweet about it at that hashtag. And we're tracking those, and we'll use those as the questions for the panel that we're having at the end. So if you've just got funny things to say about the event, you can also just tweet those too. But we'll take what we can get. We're trying to get trending, okay? We're trying to get trending. Work on that a little bit. So also, if you're sharing on Facebook or LinkedIn, all those types of things, we're happy to do that. So that's my big spiel for today, and I'll turn you over to Alex.
Thank you, Tim. Hello, everyone. Are you happy that it's Friday? It's Friday. The only thing you have to do is sit there and watch the talks and listen to the speakers. It's very easy. Have you seen a TED Talk? Yes. Unanimous yes. Have you been to a TEDxCapeTown event? Yes. Are there a couple of no's? I hope so, because there is one on the 17th of November. Right, I'm just planting the seed there. You should come. My name is Alex. On the program, it says Alexandrnya Audagnotti. You can call me Al. It's easy. I am a TEDx volunteer. We all are. Hello to my fellow TEDx fellas. Woo! And without further ado, I'm just going to play you a very quick little snippets about what TEDx is and how it differs from TED. And then we are going to get on with the rest of the program.
Getting access to great ideas hasn't always been easy. Back in the day, you'd only be in the loop if you were literate, educated, rich, and a man. Good thing times have changed. The internet has made sharing ideas a breeze, and no one's doing that better than TED. No, not you, TED. I'm talking about the non-profit organization that's big on spreading awesome ideas. Twice a year, TED holds this conference where thought leaders from around the world give some mind-blowing talks. Then TED sticks them online so you can watch them for free. Volunteers translate the videos, which means anyone can be inspired by the likes of Bill Gates, Malcolm Gladwell, or Jane Goodall. So what is TEDx? TEDx is a way for you to run a mini TED-style event in your own town. Hold talks around issues that matter to your community, free from corporate, political, and religious agendas. So take part. Don't stop watching videos at TED.com. Keep an eye out for your nearest TEDx event, and if you're up for it, apply to start your own. TED, ideas worth spreading.
Awesome. Okay, so a huge thank you to the Graduate School of Business for welcoming us on board. It is an honor to be here. So the next talk, the speaker is Emily Rose Phillips. She is a role model, actually. Sideline to volunteering with TEDx, because I have so much free time, is I also run a very small NGO here in Cape Town. So your theme of leading with agility resonates with me quite personally. And Emily Rose Phillips, who is quite a successful woman in her own right, she is on the board of directors for 3 different associations in Wisconsin. She is a partner at Baines & Co. and also an activist investor. She didn't plan to be as successful as she is now, and has also had to wing it quite a bit. So without further ado, you're going to watch her talk. Enjoy. Oh.
Don't panic, Herman, you're not yet.
How many of you grew up knowing exactly what you wanted to do? Some kids get to college and they're lucky enough to have that all mapped out. It's in a spreadsheet. They know when they're going to get married, they're going to have kids, they're going to move to what suburb. We call them accountants. For the rest of us, it's just not that clear. The world that we live in tells us that we have to play it safe, right? We need a master plan. What are you going to do in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? Our corporate ecosystem still operates on this antiquated platform of predict accurately and plan accordingly. But because of technology, the pace of business has accelerated, and now you can't be an expert for very long. We place a premium on education, designations, and being able to prove that you've done it before we give you an opportunity, right? How many times have you heard, well, we hire for potential, but I'd like to see the portfolio of all the examples where you've done exactly what we're looking to hire you for? My experience has been quite the opposite. I had had a very unconventional career path. I've had 3 different jobs in 3 unrelated industries, and I've been pretty successful, or so they tell me, and they told me to say it today. I've learned that being an agile leader is a concept where you prepare yourself for the unpredictable. You can't always know what comes your way, and you can't always have the answers. So how do you do it? How do you prepare for the disruptions that you know life will give you? Now bear with me, I promised I wasn't going to give a nerdy talk, but there's some definitions we have to cover. Agile leadership is a style of leadership that's entrepreneurial. The old school predict and plan relied on people to be able to dictate and lead, right? If you could predict what was going to happen, you knew how to boss people around. But in this new environment, you need to be able to act agilely with mental agility. So I've learned that you need three things, three components in agile leadership. One, you need an iterative process. Two, you need to build a tribe of resources. And three, you need to get uncomfortable daily. Push yourself outside your comfort zone. So what is an iterative process? Besides being really fun to say, I've learned that an iterative process for me has 6 components, and then we're done with the math. 1, in any environment, in any business, in any industry, create a problem statement. Build a hypothesis, set out to prove your hypothesis, disprove your hypothesis sometimes. 4, architect a solution. And 5, reach out to that tribe of resources anytime you have questions, need help, introductions, outsource knowledge. And when it's all said and done, step back, reflect on how it went, refine, could you have done it better? Did you do it well? How do you keep doing it? And repeat. So what's a tribe of resources? A tribe of resources are a group of people that you have in your pocket at any given time. Not literally, but they're people you meet. Starts when you're little, on a playground, when you go to school, the people that you're sitting next to, if you've had a chance to talk to them. You never know when you're going to meet somebody. Essentially, you meet them and you say, wow, you are super cool. I think I can learn something from you. I might even be able to teach you something. I want you in my tribe. And the really important component of this piece is that you help them. You're loyal to them, you protect them, you push them, you challenge them, and you help them daily. My absolute favorite one to hate but love, because this is a talk that I'm giving and I'm telling you that it's important to do these things, is pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. Now I'm going to give you a hypothetical example of this one because I'm sure you're all familiar with your own comfort zone and pushing yourself outside it. But let's pretend for a minute that you're helping a group of really smart students put together a TEDx. And you're helping them with some sponsorship grid and some introductions and things, and then one of them approaches you and says, would you consider talking? No, I thought we're doing like a corporate advisory thing, like I thought we had some. And then all of a sudden, everything inside your body like contracts, and you're just like, that sounds terrible. I mean, you speak in your industry all the time. You're always presenting on economics and things like that. And I mean, you don't know what that's like, but a TEDx, that's crazy. And then somewhere inside you, all of a sudden you hear this weird voice, and it's like, I would love the opportunity to give back to my community. And you're like, whoa, who just said that? And pretty soon you're on stage giving a talk. But that's okay, because as terrified as you are, you go back to your process and you ask your tribe, and they're all like, yeah, you should totally do it. And I'm like, I can't believe they're in my tribe. And then you're giving a talk. But the bottom line is you stand in front of individuals every day, right? Leadership is about leading within yourself. And so, you have a process, you have your tribe, you push yourself outside your boundaries, but does it really work? Like, what's the point? I have learned that if you have all of these things, if you do these things, if you're intentional about your approach, what you approach becomes far less important than how you approach it, because that's the key. If you're confident in how you'll approach something, even though you don't know the answers, you've never done it before, then it doesn't matter whether or not you've done it before, right? Unless you're looking for a cardiac surgeon. There are some exceptions to this process. So the nerdy part's over. Thanks for bearing with me, and I appreciate the laughs. The next part is my personal story, right? So in theory, it sounds great. In execution, is it possible? My story starts when I was 4. I used to play adult all of the time. I was a very strange child, few friends. And I read like crazy, and I fell in love with this idea of being an attorney. I would line my dolls up in the courtroom, and I was constantly, winning everything, I think. And pretty soon, that wasn't enough, and so then I made partner in my mind by 30, because I thought at 26 years is possible. And that wasn't enough, so then I thought politics, because I was experiencing that with my parents and discipline, so I thought I had what it took. Pretty soon, I was every day just imagining that I was changing the world. And my dolls were never, ever, ever bored. They were never bored. My sister, she hated playing with me, but my dolls, they were voters, so it really counted. So fast forward, right? 4 years old, you've got a plan. Adults would ask me all the time, like, what do you want to be? You want to be a ballerina? You want to be a princess? I'd be like, whoa. I don't think so. I feel better for these adults. Like, I have a very specific career plan. I want to be an attorney. I want to be a partner by 30. I want to be a 2-term governor, and then I'm going to end up in the Oval Office. And they would look at me, and mostly out of concern for my parents, and pat me on the head, which only fueled the fire for me, like my commitment to my plan. I knew what I was going to do. 5, 6, 7, 8, move forward. Senior year in college, when the inevitable disruption occurs, and for me it was a car accident. On March 28, 2004, I was involved in a car accident. I lost my entire left eyelid and my vision in my left eye, and a handful of other injuries that have become greater as the story goes on. I had no idea how long it would be for me to get back on my feet. The doctors didn't know how long it would take to reconstruct my eyelid, which was the point of most of the surgeries. And in order for me to stay on my mom's health insurance, I had to stay a full-time college student. As many of you imagine, being in school for longer than you have to without a point, other than surgery, which an eyelid is important, so I suppose that's a different point, it is exhausting. So 3 years later, I finally was eligible to graduate. Well, I was eligible to graduate a while before, but I could finally graduate. And I was sitting there, I'm pretty sure I sprinted across the stage to get my fake diploma, because they mail it. It was a very disappointing experience. And at the party, when I'm talking to everybody, and I'm so excited, right? I finally have my diploma, I'm excited, except I was exhausted. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. Law school wasn't even on my radar anymore, because after 7 years of full-time work, full-time school, and then 3 of the last 7 years were full-time work, full-time school, full-time surgery, I didn't want to go to law school. If somebody gave me a homework assignment, I was going to throw the book at them. Like, I was done. So they asked me, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And I thought, oh, I just really have no idea. Or my favorite, what are you going to do with your liberal arts degree? I'm like, oh, it's 2008. What do you think I should do? Everyone's hiring. So it's an awesome time to graduate from college. So I worked at a restaurant downtown, and I had access to all these really successful people. I used to call them the Milwaukee Business Journal people until I met a lot of them, and they're even more awesome now. And I thought to myself, I bet if I talked to these people, I could figure it out. And this was the birth of what I now call my own iterative process, or what anybody can use it, right? So I created a problem statement. Number 1, I need a job. Number 2, if I interview all these really successful people that seem to have everything figured out, I might be able to find a job. 3, prove it. I had to actually go interview all these really successful people. And after asking them all sorts of questions, what do you do? How'd you get there? Do you like it? Would you recommend it? Would you recommend me for it? No? Yeah? 4, I architected a solution. I landed my very first job. I was the print agent assistant at Ford Models, an international modeling agency. And as a history sociology major, I was the perfect fit because I knew nothing about modeling. I was a jeans and t-shirt kid. I loved pizza. I didn't know about this, like all this fitness stuff they were talking about. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to be the best print agent assistant they've ever hired. And so I became a professional sponge. And I think I asked like 100 questions a day. And pretty quickly I learned that anything you can predict that can go wrong on a photo shoot will go wrong on a photo shoot. And this is where I came into this experience of agility and constantly having to be on your feet and thinking quickly. And I thought to myself, boy, this sounds a lot like serving. Corporate world isn't really much different than a restaurant. 1, you have to figure out what people want, i.e. read their minds. 2, you have to deliver it, and then you have to figure out when they want it, right? i.e. yesterday. And when things go wrong, you just fix it. No excuses, they don't care, just fix it. And never in that process is it ever about you. So I worked at the modeling agency for a couple of years, and I loved it, and I had a lot of fun. But then I made a very important discovery. I learned that you could get a paycheck that had a comma in it. And I was very excited about this. Punctuation had never been so important. So I interviewed at several different companies, and I realized without a technical degree, the really only place I could make some money was to get into sales. So I interviewed with a information technology company, a management consulting firm. And they asked me a handful of questions, and I didn't have a business background. I obviously wasn't a programmer. I didn't have any experience in software. But I said, you know, I worked full-time going through all these surgeries. I didn't know anything about modeling. I increased revenue there during the middle of a credit crisis. I'll figure it out. So they took a chance on me and they hired me. Day one, I'm super excited. Sitting in a conference room, in walks this guy. He's got a magic marker and a whiteboard, and I went through this very extensive full day of training to become an expert in this field. So he writes everything out. This is how software started, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay, got it. Ushers me to my cube. Now I have a phone, I have a laptop, and I have 600 companies to call, cold call, and a lofty sales goal. So a couple weeks go by, and I'm calling people with this script, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. Nobody's answering. Voicemails are even more awkward. I just had no idea what was going on. And then if a person did answer, they'd ask me a question. I was like, Google quickly. We should get together in person and talk about this. It was awful. I felt so stupid and so clueless. And then pretty soon I thought to myself, why aren't you using your own process? Why don't you use the same tools that you used to get your first job, to become really good at your first job, in your second job? And then I called all my former clients from the modeling agency, and I said, you know, I really miss working with you because I knew what I was doing, and in this new job, I don't really know what I'm doing. So would you mind introducing me to somebody in your IT department? Because I'd like to learn how technology drives your business function. I know how your business works, and I know how, you know, I understand the brand and stuff, so let's make that happen. And they did. And pretty soon, I could ditch all this cold calling nonsense, which is incredibly character building, but at very high cost. And I was getting meetings, and I was getting opportunities, and I learned the business. And soon I reapproached that 600 list full of companies, and I became the top salesperson within 2 years. I built the largest territory because I asked so many questions. I went back to my process. I realized that a tribe of resources weren't just friends to hang out with. This was a group that you could really cultivate and also help and give back. So I was excited. I had a comma in my paycheck. Starting to think about maybe adding a comma, but that was years away. And I'm at the top of my game at 28 years old. Pretty soon I'm at a business event and I run into a woman. She works at an investment firm. And she asked me what I did for a living. I asked her how much she loved technology. Her eyes glazed over, so I said, I help people get things that they don't have. And she said, oh, well, what are your career plans? And I thought to myself, well, I haven't really thought about it since I was 4. And she said, what do you want to do with your life? And I didn't know her very well, so I didn't mention the words world domination quite yet. But she got me thinking, and so she asked me to come over to her office and have a cup of coffee. So I went to her office. I've always been an opportunity enthusiast, and pretty soon it was clear that she was looking to hire a junior partner to her practice, to be her eventual successor out of a 10-year-plus plan. And I thought, wow, in this moment in time, everything I've worked so hard is validated. I haven't known what I was going to do. Things have come to me, and I've worked incredibly hard. I've used this process. I've asked for help. And now this person, because this is like high finance, right? This person is asking me to take this jump and take this risk. And I left her office thinking, oh, but God, you have to be a financial advisor. That sounds awful. Technology, that's really cool. But the more I thought about it, the more that I learned about this job. 7 months I did my due diligence in learning what this opportunity would entail. I thought, if you use the same process that got you your first job, that made you better at your job, your second job, etc., why couldn't you learn finance? And then this intriguing piece too, that maybe you could give the industry a little facelift. So I took the job, and it was very difficult. As I packed up my office from new resources and all the spreadsheets of like, you're killing it, put them away, because I wasn't going to see that for a long time. And I thought to myself, are you making the right decision? Are you really going to be able to do this? Before fear could run wild and the insecurities could control me, I built a transition plan. My problem statement was I didn't know a lot about investments. My due diligence or my build the hypothesis, interview everybody I could get my hands on. For the first 2 years, I conducted 3,000 discovery meetings. I met with subject matter experts, I met with individuals, asked them what they loved about their advisor, if they didn't like their relationship, did they need an advisor by chance? And pretty soon I started to fill in the blanks and build a framework, and I realized again that no matter what environment you work in, if you take the risk and you figure it out, all you need is your process, your tribe, and to push yourself outside your comfort zone. Because working at a very top elite firm with people that have Ivy League degrees like ornaments on a holiday tree, it's okay. You can always learn, right? So it's been 3 years since I've been at Baird, and I love it. It's an incredible opportunity. And I think to myself, what's next? Hopefully not another job for a very long time. I've had it with that. But why is it relevant? Why does it matter to have a process to use your people, right? Because agile leadership is this concept where you lead from within. You get to know yourself, you get confident, you're fearless. You take care of people in your life, your tribe, and you protect and you help each other. And if you push yourself outside your comfort zone, you're always prepared for whatever comes your way. And the next thing that comes your way, I'm a little bit afraid because this is intimidating in itself, so I don't know what's next. But you'll be able to handle it. Our community requires more of this type of leadership. Our business requires more of this type of leadership. When you leave today, think to yourself, what are the things that you are most afraid of? What have you not done? Because I guarantee you, everything you've done to this point has prepared you for this. So challenge yourself. And remember, the nerdy parts, the iterative process, the glue, the tribe of resources, and to get outside your comfort zone. Thank you.
It does feel weird to clap for the video, doesn't it? Admit it, you're all like, I mean, she did a good job, but she can't hear this, right? Busted. So that's why we gave you wine, to make it a little bit easier to get better as you go along. Our next topic is going to switch gears slightly. We're going to hear from Herman Singh, who's the Group Executive Innovation Strategy for MTN. He's going to talk a little bit more about sustainability. So what he's looking at is how, in an African context, which is a little bit different than Milwaukee, just slightly different than Milwaukee, in an African context, how we can harness innovative, sustainable practices, including technology, to make sure there's long-term value creation for all. And I think, for those of you who are at the GSB, you know that that's one of our big driving points. So I'm very looking forward to hearing this. So without further ado, Herman Singh. There you go.
Thank you very much.
And I'm going to give you that too. You'll need that.
Thanks. Thanks, folks. A real pleasure to be here. TED's been a passion of mine for a long time. It's being on a TED Talk is almost as big as being in a Bollywood movie for me. So this is really big. Also, interesting time for us to be talking to you, given what MTN is going through right now. I think people misunderstood South Africans when we went into Nigeria. When we say "yeah, well, no, fine," that actually means something else. So I'm here to talk to you about Industry 4.0 and what it means from an African context. So a few points. Firstly, South Africa is not Africa. Let's just get that cleared up quickly. 54 countries in Africa. South Africa is actually a combination of Switzerland and Bangladesh squeezed into one country. And if you've been to those countries, you'll know exactly what I mean. So this presentation is not about you. It's not about Cape Town. It's not about South Africa at all. It's about what Africa actually is, a continent of 1.2 billion people, $1.4 trillion of GDP. And the question is, how do we build businesses in a world where technology is moving incredibly rapidly, in such a way that it becomes self-sustaining and feeds back into the community. As you can see, governments in Africa are actually quite stressed about business tourists who come in, build businesses, and just take dividends out. What you want to do is really leave a lot of the money behind and build capacity. As MTN, we're the biggest investors in Africa. In most countries we're the biggest taxpayers, we're the biggest employers, we're the biggest generators of revenue, we have the biggest customer base, and we're the most trusted brand. So in other words, this is unfortunately a lightning rod, right, in a way. So the first thing I want to just say that everything that you know about industries is changing, and will continue to change. If you take a telco, for example, what the metrics show is you've got exponential data growth. In other words, there's massive increases in consumption of data. Mobile penetration in Africa, in parts of Africa, getting to 100%. We've got rapidly rising mobile broadband, and smartphone adoptions getting up to, in South Africa, 60, 70%. In many countries in Africa, we're getting over 30%. But data monetization is very slow. In other words, it's very hard to charge for data. So in other words, data prices are dropping at about 50 to 60% a year in most of our territories. Consumption's up 100, 150%. Revenues only up 20%, 30% because of this massive reduction in the price of data. So the revenue per user is falling, and there's huge pressure on CapEx. As a telco, your average telco has to spend, for every dollar we earn, we spend 25 cents in capital. We put it back in. We've got to build towers, we've got to build power systems, we've got to build data centers, we've got to build radio access networks. So I don't think there's any other company in Africa that has to spend 25 cents in every dollar of revenue back into capital. Okay, so that's part of the challenge that you have running a telco, which means that you really have to change the way that you're running a business. You're running a business where you're now getting to digitally native companies attacking a telco. And so the challenge is, what do you do? So what telcos have done is they've recognized that when rules change, everybody goes back to zero. So the fact that we built a great SMS business in the face of WhatsApp, SMS has basically died. So today, the only people who send you SMSs are your loved ones, insurance companies, banks, etc. I mean, nobody else is actually sending you SMSs. So today, the SMS product is known as A2P. A2P stands for application to person. It means that a person's not sending you an SMS. It's a messaging system where a piece of software is sending you a message. That's what SMSs have turned into. So we've had to adapt our business to accept that actually people sending people messages using an SMS service is not the future. Applications sending you messages is the way of the future. So fundamental shift in our business. What we've had to do is also recognize that actually the future lies in adjacencies. So we've started exploring businesses near us where you could say, well, because we're a telco with 250 million customers in 23 countries, 22, we just sold Cyprus. So what does this mean? What can you do with 250 million customers? What else can you sell them? We generate $12 billion of revenue a year. What else can we sell to people in the territories that we work in? Well, the first thing is, will the real Africa please stand up, right? Because it's very clear that, in fact, there's two views on what Africa is. And, MTN borrowed 1/3 of the value of MTN twice in its history to expand into the territories that we operate in. So think about that. We borrowed 1/3 of the value of the company to grow into the markets that we're currently in. That's actually quite a ballsy move. To put it in context for you, Boeing, it cost Boeing 1/3 of the value of Boeing to build the 747. When it flew in 1969, they asked the CEO, what happens if this prototype crashes on takeoff? And he said, why don't we talk about something more pleasant like nuclear war? Okay, so the real question is, what Africa are we talking about here? And this is very important because Africa is actually a very interesting place. You see, Africa isn't experiencing Industry 4.0. It's actually experiencing Industry 2.0 because Africa skipped two of the big ages. If you think about the development of the world economy, we went through the age of manufacturing, which was in the 1900s to the 1960s, and then we went through the age of distribution, which was in the 60s to the 90s. Then we got into the age of information, so SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, etc., which really started in the 90s, and now we're in the age of the customer, who's really driving outcomes. The fact is, Africa missed this. It missed this completely. So in other words, when you go into Africa, you don't have disruption. So the word disruption is actually wrong. when people talk about digital disruption, those words don't work in Africa because you see there's nothing to disrupt. You're not disrupting anything. There's no factories. There's no big hospitals. There's no big banks. There's no big branches and ATMs. None of these things that you would disrupt in the developed market exist because they were never built. There's no landline. So in Africa, you have a digital empowerment, a digital upliftment. So what the internet is doing in Africa is massively uplifting. It's creating value and improvement in life on a grand scale. It's not doing what you're seeing in other countries, which is actually compressing value chains, colliding industries, and destroying livelihoods. It's exactly the opposite in Africa. And people actually don't get this from the outside looking in. So I keep saying to people, understand where the narrative comes from. The word disruption was invented by the incumbents who are being disrupted. And as I said, those don't exist in most places in Africa. So this is what Africa is right now. As I said, 1.2 billion people, $1.4 trillion of GDP. GDP per capita is sitting at $1,200 per annum. And cities with more than 1 million people, 40. There are more cities with more than 1 million people in Africa than there are in Europe. And only 30% of them are banked. So lots of people, big market, should be a great market. And so now when you start drilling down into Africa, you realize that actually Africa is typified by abundance and scarcity at the same time. So in other words, labor in Africa is actually relatively cheap. So there's an abundance of labor. There's an abundance of entrepreneurship and hustle. You don't see it in South Africa. But in places like Delhi and Nigeria, where there's no social grants, people don't go to sleep hungry, right? Why not? Well, because everybody has a job, because if you don't work, you don't eat. And so everybody has a hustle, and many people have many, and even people with full-time jobs have a side hustle. So there's an astonishing abundance of entrepreneurship. Now, if you start looking at these stats, this is a percentage of people that have access to sewage, roads, piped water, and electric grids, and you can see what the infrastructure shortfall in Africa is. Massive deviations and shortfalls. Then go and have a look at access to mobile phone services and access to data services, and you can see an abundance. So that is the dichotomy that you have in Africa. You have abundance and scarcity at the same time. And so part of the reason I say that digital is not disruptive but uplifting is because so many people have it. So many people have access to it. The question is, what can you build with it? This just shows you, for example, the increase in the number of mobile subscriptions. You can see we're getting very close to 90% of people in Africa getting access to communication services. And you can see smartphones are reaching a very, very large number of people. And very soon, in fact, by 2022, you'll get something like 800 million smartphones in Africa. Well, that's 4 years out, folks. Here's what's happened with mobile banking, for example. They already globally, so in Africa alone, there's 650 million people with cell phones, 388 million people with internet access, and 130 million people on Facebook. Okay, so already you can start to see the actual power that digital technology is starting to have. It's also a very young country. The median age in Africa is 19. The global median is 30. Okay, so that means you've got a group of people who actually adopt technology very, very quickly. Here's the challenge that you have digitally. Africa, if you have a look at this, is actually still a very constrained country from a digital point of view. There's still not enough access, there's not enough devices, governments haven't digitized. There's no such thing as a national identity document in most countries. In countries like Nigeria, for example, there are 12 different types of document that are acceptable for proof of identity, one of which is a letter from your chief to state that you were born in the village where he is the chief of. And that's the nature of Africa. You've got to recognize that. Addresses don't exist in many parts of Africa. So if you're running a business, as we are, which is to deliver goods and services, where do you send it? So what does Africa need? Well, clearly there's a huge focus, if you look at different countries, on things like water, sewage, roads, electricity, medical, and education, but also banking services. So the question is, how do we now start making use of this massive change that's happening in the world on the digital front? There's massive change in technology, there's massive changes in business models, there's amazing new insight we can create, there's networks that are being built. How do we use that to basically transform Africa? Well, there's a huge number of startups rushing in. And so if you look at all the verticals from health to education to power, there's there's thousands of startups. In fact, this is just an investment snapshot showing you the number of companies that are being invested in, not the total number of companies that have been started. This is just 201 of the startups that we are tracking. What's very clear is that this strategy is not going to work. So in other words, thousands of startups aren't going to solve the problem. The reason being that if you have a food delivery service and it only works in Nairobi, and you're going to have to build one in Mombasa, and then you've got to build one in Lagos, and you've got to build one in Abuja, it just doesn't work. What you need is a pan-African food delivery service. You need a pan-African education service. Why? Because it's the only way to keep costs down, gather enough customers, and build a single platform that can be shared with everyone, and where the content can be shared with everyone. Platform businesses rule. We already in the world today have $2 trillion platform businesses, Amazon and Apple, and there's many more coming. In fact, these things often happen in threes, so the question is, who's next? Is it Microsoft or is it Alphabet? So clearly, platform businesses work. So I'm going to give you some examples of the platform businesses that do work, because platform businesses in Africa that are really starting to scale are all based on innovation and partnerships. They're based on forming partnerships with the communities and the SMEs in the markets that you operate in and giving them a stake in the business. And that's how you create sustainability in these markets. So what does it take to win? The first thing that you've got to recognize is you're trying to sell something to people who may be next to you or far away. So in other words, I may be in Lagos, I want to sell something to somebody in Abuja. The second thing that you've got to decide is, are you sending something physical that you have to transport? Are you sending something that you can email? Is it music? Is it video? Is it games? Because I can then send that to you over the network. Or is it a service? Are you trying to hail a taxi or order food? So it's very important to understand what it is that you're trying to sell. Is it online to offline? Am I going online to get something offline? And bearing in mind that malls don't exist, in Africa the total number of people per mall is about 500,000. In South Africa the equivalent figure is 400. There's 400 people per every mall, very similar to the numbers in the States. Do you have inventory? If you're selling cell phones, does your local shop carry the inventory that I can carry in an online shop which has an infinitely long shelf, for example? Scale, is it possible to scale this? Because the problem that you have worldwide is generally most industries, there's only one. There's only one Facebook, there's only one Pinterest, there's only one Amazon, there's only one Twitter, there's only one, etc., PayPal. So there's only room for one. You can't have thousands of these players because they just can't get to scale. The unit economics just don't work. And finally, you've got to handle the fact that you've got to handle very, very low transaction value. So all at the same time. So this is what it takes to win. So what does a telecommunications company have that can help? The first thing it's got a community of users. It's got 250 million customers. It's got trust. MTN's the most trusted brand in Africa. It's got channel access. So in other words, everyone's got a phone. You're connected to me. I'm using data to communicate with you. So I've got a channel I can communicate with. I know who you are. I've had to go out and KYC all of you. So Fika, Rika, I know who you are. I know where you live. I've got your identity. And I can book you I can charge you for the things that I'm selling you because I'm connected to a wallet. I can handle small payments. I can fulfill, which means I can deliver stuff to you. And I know how to deal with cash. We collect $250 million of cash roughly every week. Okay, we have to because we're selling prepaid airtime, and prepaid airtime is paid for with cash. So this is amazing because actually the things we've got work very well in a world that's rapidly converging on combined commerce. What I mean by that is you build a destination, people come to the destination, and you start selling one thing, but then you start selling lots of things. So you go to Amazon, you bought books, and then suddenly you're buying cell phones, then you're buying Amazon Music, then you're buying Amazon Video, then you're getting into Amazon Games. You go to ShopRite Checkers, you used to buy cheese and bread and dog food, but now suddenly you're paying bills, you're paying for tickets, you're collecting your social grants, etc., etc. You can almost do banking. And it's all about building destinations. And so if you start looking at the trends, you can see China, today is at 20% of all retail is actually online. The UK is sitting at 16%. Africa is at about 0.5%, but following a path that's very, very similar to the path that India took. So it's very clear that Africa is growing very, very rapidly in terms of the e-commerce space. So here's the first case study. It looks at mobile money. These are the countries that we run mobile money in. We already have something like 70 million customers, of which 22 million are active. In other words, this is the biggest bank. The key thing here is there are 250,000 partners who are agents, all of whom assist with topping up wallets and removing money from wallets. In other words, people in the community make this wallet possible. And they're all making more money out of supporting a wallet than they're making selling airtime. So what you've done is you've dropped the cost of airtime, you've dropped the margin on airtime, and you've replaced it with a brand new business, which you've given to the agents who previously supported the one product, they now support the other product. And this is powerful because clearly you can make far more money as the volumes of money in mobile money start to rise. And the more you do that, the more you can credit score people, the more you can credit score the agent and lend them money, the more you can credit score the individual wallet holder and lend them money. So today we already issue roughly 1 million loans a month to individuals, and we started lending money out to the agents as well to make sure that agents have enough working capital so that they can run their businesses better. So to put this in context for you, mobile money is already 1/3 the size of PayPal and is growing 4 times faster. At the rate it's growing, in 4 years, this thing's going to be bigger than PayPal. Okay, so this is a solution that's been designed, built, and deployed in Africa for Africa. So there's a whole bunch of examples and case studies of what's possible. You can use it to pay for prepaid airtime, prepaid water, prepaid electricity. So you can use mobile money to solve a lot of the problems that you have in infrastructure. You can now start implementing off-grid domestic solar power in a home because you can credit score someone and you can get them to pay for their solar power using airtime or using mobile money from their home. None of these things would have been possible if you didn't have this system. So suddenly you've got people uplifting themselves, you're building up networks of people who sell solar panels, support solar panels. You can even use the system for disbursement of social grants and make sure it goes to the right people. So this becomes a very much a sustainable solution in this Industry 2.0 model that I was talking about. The second big platform is called Jumia, and Jumia basically is the first, it's the first unicorn to actually come out of Africa. It's worth roughly $1 billion. And basically it's modeled on a combination of Amazon, eBay, Uber, Mr. Delivery, Career Junction, Property 24, all merged into one. Basically, you open the app, you never leave the app. That's the logic. Right? Everything's in the app. You want to buy pizza, it's in the app. You want to pay your bills, it's in the app. You want to move money, it's in the app. You want to buy airtime, it's in the app. You want to pay for your TV, it's in the app. You want to watch a movie, in the future, it's in the app. You want to listen to music, it's in the app. You want to buy a cell phone, it's in the app. Everything's in the app, you never leave the app. That's the kind of logic. Most of this is already built. Find a boyfriend, maybe. So basically, we've gone through the total lifetime value of the customer. We've looked at everything that they're doing. We've built this app called Jumia One, which is busy being rolled out. Here's the point. There are over 500,000 small businesses embedded in the app because we don't have Jumia people making pizzas. And we don't have Jumia people implementing phones or building phones. And we don't have Jumia people singing songs, right, that you can stream. Everything is linked to small communities of businesses, small artists, small people in studios who are making movies, etc. All we are doing is building a marketplace where hundreds of thousands of small businesses can sell to millions of customers, many of whom don't live anywhere near where the small company is. So small companies can become big companies over time. And because of the fact that they're connected into mobile money, we can credit score them and lend them money for working capital over time. So to give you a sense, this business is already running at about 850 million euros of gross merchandise value. It's growing at about 90% a year in hard currency. And it has a network of about 500,000 vendors on its one system. And it's basically moving about 8 million parcels every year. Okay, basically, think of this as a business built to help small businesses. The pieces are an online marketplace and a logistics business. And this platform is basically a platform that wouldn't exist in America, but it would exist in Africa. So what are the key takeaways, folks? It's Industry 2.0. You need to really keep this thing simple and asset light and scale. You really have to use platforms to drive scale and unit economics. And it's absolutely critical that you build out ecosystems of local partners to make this sustainable over time, who design and build local solutions with local pricing to make sure that it's sustainable over time. Because actually it's a business designed in Africa, for Africans, by Africans. And that makes it actually astonishingly powerful. And I think I nailed it on time. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, I really appreciate it. Cheers, thank you. Well, he was 27 seconds over, but we'll give him, I mean, come on, it's pretty good, it's pretty good. I'm a little bit nervous now because Alexandrnya just reminded me that everything I say into this microphone is going out to Facebook right now, so thanks for that, I appreciate that, that's really helpful. Thanks so much for that, Herman. I think it's really interesting. I think it ties in really well with our next speaker, who is Jay Van Zyl. His title is super cool. It's Computation Social Scientist. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds good. So that's a good business card already. So you're off to a good start there. What he's going to be talking about is looking at cloud computing, artificial intelligence, looking at how businesses can leverage that type of digital transformation to, as Herman was talking about, to be more efficient, to be more effective, to build sustainability into his processes. So without further ado, Jay. And I'm going to move you ahead one. Oh, there we go. We're getting rid of Herman. It's your turn. Thanks.
This is partly a story about a personal journey, and one that started some years ago when I woke up one day realizing that, oh dear, there's a human in the system. So imagine your surprise when you come out of a technology world and out of a mathematics world and out of a world of invention, and one day finding out that it's got nothing to do with the things that you have done, but it's got to do with all these humans that you surround yourself with all the time. So today is about the human organism and the fact that all of us are just algorithms. And it really starts a little bit like this. So here's an illustration. You know, if I move around the world and I visit people, I'm known as Jay Van Zyl. For those who know me locally, like I was introduced earlier, you might know me as something different. Now the question is, if you want to solve this problem, there are probably a multitude of ways in which you can do that. And one of the ways you can do it is you can create a taxonomy, you can create some rules, and you can define that within the rules of J, there might be a way in which we can say that Van Zyl exists. But you know, we have to program that, we have to think, we have to make it deliberate. Maybe we want to make it a little bit abstract, and we want to create some form of translation for people. So you want to say that it's actually fun sale in some parts of the world. But now, if you've already coded that, it means that it's fairly fixed. Now you have to create a way in which you want to abstract it and loosen it a little bit. If you want to loosen it a little bit, it means that you have to create an API. You all have to have APIs, obviously, because the new world says that if I don't have an access to some programming interface, it means that I can't exist because I can't integrate, I can't translate properly. Well, maybe there is a better answer. Maybe the answer is just that I'll create an algorithm. Isn't it how it works in the new world? In the new world, what we do is we collect a bunch of data points. Based on those data points, we create some agents. We build ourselves an automatic prediction engine. On the back of the prediction engine, it'll know automatically that at some parts of the world I'm known as Jay Van Zyl, and some part I'm known as Jay Van Zyl. And then what I do is I just let this agent perpetuate whenever I need it to perpetuate across my various devices and technologies and things that are going to occupy my life. Isn't that the new world? So let's go on a journey. So the brief journey goes that we're going to start with a thing called the waves of change. And the way that the waves of change are started is the fact that as humans, there are very, very few things that separate us from the rest of the living beings on this planet. But one of those things is the fact that we can use our brains to construct tools and to integrate and to be able to make our environment better. And from the beginning of dawn, what we've been able to do is to be able to use that brain for some form or some other purpose. And as we use that brain, we realized that we want to connect with other brains. And as we connected, we started organizing our world. We started basically telling animals or controlling animals, we're controlling vegetation. We started making sure that our environment is what we want it to be. And the more that happened, the more we wanted to control. And we became obsessed with a central structure. We made sure that the rules around us confine us and create boundaries in which we operate. And we created legal and governmental and medical and all these structures to make sure that all of the things that happen to us can happen around a central structure. And then humans woke up again. And we realized that maybe there's an alternative way in which we should look at that. Because when we started investing in infrastructure, we now figured out that it's about the social networks, and it's about the physical networks, and it's about the human networks, and it's about all these things that enable us to get to a certain place. It is about the platform that we need to be able to move around the planet, if you had to think about hyperlocal. And as that happened, there was an unintended consequence. There was a side effect. And the side effect basically meant that we all ended up looking the same. We all ended up creating exactly the same kind of environment. We live in the same kind of world. We created the same kind of output. We buy the same kind of product. At the same time of the day, driving the same kind of vehicle. We eat the same kind of food. We complain about the same kind of things every single day. We have just become highly, highly habitual, ritualistic, programmatic, basically programmable beings. We have just become algorithms. And at some point we believed that maybe there was a difference, and maybe Darwin was correct in saying that yes, there's a thing called the tree of life. But then we proved the fact that we're just one common genetic makeup. All of the living beings on this planet is basically 1 degree removed from each other. And as we figure that out, we now have to operate in a new world of commerce. And maybe the new world of commerce requires a new way of looking at things. And there once was a time when we invented product. We took an enormous amount of ideas, we froze them in time, we invented an outcome from that particular reinvention, and we push it into the market. And as we push it out, we realize that it's got nothing to do with the fact that we could take finite resources and squeeze it into a single output, but we can turn it into something entirely different. Maybe the service platform is the connectedness, the fact that I can perform a transaction, I can share ideas with you, I can do all of that across this device as a service delivery platform. Maybe product does not exist anymore at all. Maybe it's entirely gone. Because at some point we realize also that if we're going to abstract value, we now know that if I want to get from one point to another point, the purpose of a travel exercise from one place to another is not to pay for it or not to engage with it. The point is that I want to be able to network things together, and I want to then collect the data points to know exactly that I know that somebody at 9 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning leaves their home, arrives at work at 6:30. I know that they go to a restaurant at night. I know that they've gone to the friends on a Friday afternoon. I know that after they've been out on a night on town, they go from home very late and they paid the penalty because something went wrong on the way home because maybe they've had too much wine. But the point is you can track every single one of those bits of behaviors, and that gets us onto what the algorithm actually looks like. And maybe the algorithm is the fact that we all are the same, and maybe it's about identity. Maybe the new world says that we can create a cipher or a footprint or a measure about the actual things that you do every single day, because everything that you do is just a transaction. Every time that you wake up, every time that you touch a piece of digital equipment, every time you connect onto a network, every time you do a transaction, if it's financial or otherwise, everything gets recorded. Everything is a data point, and anything at some point can be used to understand who you are. So I wanted to watch this just to get a feel for what identity means to some countries. The question is, has this already happened to you in your everyday life? Because when you go to your favorite telecommunications company, or you go to your favorite bank, you go to your favorite doctor, your favorite lawyer, or any institution of the sort, or your favorite school, you have to divulge an enormous amount of information about yourself. Now the question is, what are they going to do with it? And at a certain point, they're going to want to determine who you really are. Can they tell that this person is going to go through this exercise? If you're going to go to your business school, you have to get a bunch of friends to tell the organization that you are going to stick with the program, you are going to pay your fees, are going to do all those things. So we're already in the scoring system. All we're doing now is we're making it more efficient. There are technologies being built to be able to profile and track you. And it doesn't matter if I track your transactional behavior and I can lend you $1 at a time to be able to buy more airtime as a credit. And I know that if you pay it back 4 times, I know that you're more credit worthy than the person that's borrowed $10,000. I can move you along a certain journey. And all because there are now networks. It's got nothing to do with you anymore. You don't exist. The individual is gone. The individual now sits as a node in a structure. It's measured in the context of either a knowledge graph or in a social graph or an economic graph, depending on which technology platform you belong to today. And it doesn't matter if that's your bank or your telecommunications institution, because at some point, if you want to transact with anybody, you're going to need the tooling. You're going to need to have access. You need to have a vector in a graph. If you don't exist as a vector in a graph, nobody is going to make sure, or everybody's going to make sure that you do not participate. So that means that we now have to figure out your emotion. How do we know what makes you different? Because there's only one thing, because there might be 10 people with the same name, who's got the same number, who drives the same car, who eats the same kind of food, who do all the same kind of things. So that means I need to find another way of determining that you say who you are. And that means we want to have a pulse. And that pulse is going to determine every single step of what you do. The pace at which you engage with everything that you engage with around you that leaves some form of evidence that we can pick up a measurement point. And maybe that measurement point is a kind of behavior. Maybe every time that you phone a call center, I know that the sentiment in your voice has changed. I know that the time of the morning that you phoned. I know the kind of food that you bought in a credit card that morning and the fact that you phoned a friend before you made the phone call that maybe influenced you. Because all of that will then create just a structure. It's just an integrated graph of your entire existence. And that means that we can create finite measures of knowing exactly why and how you're going to be doing things, because we can move from the how we did things to the why you do things. And once we know why, almost everything about you can be redesigned. And that gets us to what's known as the happiness hypothesis. What is the definition of true happiness? It just means that you know what true sadness means. What is the definition of true sadness? You know what happiness means. So at some point, all that it means is that it's a vector for every one of you, because every one of you might have a separate distance. Because maybe you are the kind of person that phones a call center of that institution every single week, and every single week you complain, and by the fact that you can complain, it makes you happy. So it was never about the act, it was the reason why you did it in the first place. And then being able to measure that and building a model around it is not going to be the way you're going to fix it in the physical world by creating some modern infrastructure and thinking that the human is going to respond to that. It's not going to be the fact that you transform, and this is an example of a branch that got turned into a co-working space to bring people closer to you, because people do not want to go there maybe in the first place. There must be another way in which you can measure what they do that sits far beyond the original measure of the person just in a structure. You want to be able to predict the identity. And maybe that identity, and here's a real example that was taken in the context of Southern Africa, of the Great Migration. You know, the Great Migration happens during some parts of the year from the Gauteng region to the coastal regions, and then you got some parts of the year that there's a migration from what's known as, I've heard locally, immigration light, Johannesburg to Cape Town to Toronto or to London or somewhere. And you can see those movements because you can just track where the money gets spent and where people make phone calls and how all of that happens. That determines now how you're going to sell and what you're going to do with people. So there's a new kind of intelligence emerging, and maybe the new intelligence separates one human from another entirely based on the emotion that you exhibit, because everything else is measured already and already tracked. Maybe what you need to do is think about a new way, and here's an example of a project called the Def4X project. What you do is you take a bunch of kids and you track every single one as an individual. Then what you do is you look at their future aspirations. And what you do, you take those aspirations, and as they go through time, and as they learn new things, and you then build the classic recommendation systems that we've all heard about, and the likes of the Amazon, when you buy one book, it recommends another. Or maybe a modern system that knows exactly that based on your emotional state, when you learn something that was very tough, how I should recommend something new to you. Maybe there's a new kind of reframing world that is coming. And maybe the new reframing world is not just about relying on the measure that you used to have in production systems. Think about it this way. You have to measure inputs and outputs. And I'm sure at some point you've all learned about that. You have to learn about who was going to buy your product, about how you're going to use employees. But maybe the new system does not contain an employee. Maybe the likes of the efficiency drivers that we've heard before, or that we are going to hear about over the next many years about how we build business, will means that we have to invent an entirely new way of predicting what we're going to have to do and how humans are going to behave. Maybe the new system of production is entirely humanless. And that means that it's not going to be about the measure of productivity and efficiency of anything of the sort, because we already solved the how. We now want to know why. Why did that person read that book that time of the day, paying it with a credit card of that certain way? Why did they look at that word in that dictionary before 9 o'clock and not after 9 o'clock? Why did they read a book over lunch and not over dinner? Why did they read it in the afternoon when they were supposed to be at work, and why didn't they? Why did they read it on a Sunday morning rather than a Sunday afternoon? You'll be able to track every single part of that human behavior and pick up the pulse. And once you know the pulse, you're going to be much more accurate in predicting what they're going to be doing and what they're going to want to buy, not necessarily what you're going to have to design for them. So that means the new ecosystem is not about listening to the things that people have told you, because we've now seen that the business case studies are out there of people who have been able to invent at a pace that far outstripped anybody around them. Maybe the new world is about a data collection platform. And that data collection platform is a new kind of ecosystem where everybody share the knowledge that gets created from the analytics that you're going to apply on top of that platform. And maybe everything is around just a data point. And I want to take you through an example in media. Think about the way in which we analyzed some of these organizations before. Before it was to say, well, how many movies were sold this week? You know, how many people bought so many CDs this week? How many people, you know, acquired whatever access it is that we provided through the physical world? And a new world is more around why did that person decide to watch that movie that time of the day for that amount of time? Why did they skip that scene? Why did they not respond to the cliffhanger, as you know, that happens in movies to make sure you can become a binge watcher? And why in music do you listen to music at some points in the background, and why at some points do you then just fast forward it? When do you share it with your friends that you are going to listen to some music? What happens to the new musician when they want to come into the system and there is nobody to recommend them? What happens then? What happens with the millions of providers out there that want to be part of the system, because maybe music gets consumed, in this example, in an entirely different way? So what we probably need to do is to take music as a data point, carve it up into transactions, take every single transaction and measure it. Once you take every single transaction in music, you extract the rhythm and the beat. You map the rhythm and the beat onto a network view of the people that listen to that kind of music throughout the year, throughout the day, on a certain kind of playlist, when they're on a treadmill or when they're at home. Then you take the lyrics and you overlay the lyrics, and you then take the kind of financial transaction that was taking place to be able to pay for that music. And then what you do is, when you're a musician and you want somebody to use your music, all you would have to do is make sure that you got the rhythm and the beat right, the time of the day right, the lyrics right, the kind of sentiment right, the emotion right, and then you can do a match far beyond what was possible with the classical recommendation engines that we used to see of late. The modern world is more about this highly accurate social prediction abilities to be able to figure out how all of this come together. And that means that music is not music anymore. It's just data. It's just a transaction in the new world. So that means that there are three things you have to worry about as we become algorithms as humans. The first thing is you have to understand all these waves that are changing, and you have to know that it's about the individual in the context of its setting, and you have to know that influence of that setting. The next thing is you have to know the algorithms, because those algorithms are mostly about what's known as the time, the place, and the act. Once you can bring all three of those together, you'll be able to invent the new business, the new product, the new service. Without that, you're not going to have an ability to compete with the ones who will be able to figure that out. And then lastly, you have to make sure that you understand the new intelligence. And the new intelligence is that we're all just data points. We're all just a series of numbers. From the day that you are born, when you are recorded in some register and you are given a receipt called a birth certificate, and you enter your school, you get given another number that is your student number. Then you get your first phone number, you get your first bank number, you get your first university student number, you get your first salary number, your tax number, and at some point you get a death certificate number, and it's all over. And it's just a series of vectors that will determine who you are, and it's gone. So in the new world, what we're trying to do is to invent something that can predict what happens when you move from one number to another. And is there then a way to be able to make you happy way beyond what was possible before? Thank you.
Thank you. So just to clarify, is your name Jay Van Ziel or Jay Van Sale? Because that algorithm thing was very overwhelming.
Whatever you want it to be.
Okay, so it's that time for us to stand up, stretch our legs. Just so that you know, you'll walk downstairs, and directly in front of us is the men's bathroom. And if you walk towards the cash bar to get yourselves a glass of wine, you'll see the women's bathroom on the other side. And the food is free, so eat plenty of that. Just a reminder, tweet hashtag lead with agility. Yeah, we're trying to trend. And yeah, we'll see you in 15 minutes' time. Okay, so we are going to move on to the next segment of the session. And we're going to look at our roles, our managerial roles, and how we can support and guide the younger generation in their own unique ideas, and try and sorry, excuse me, I'm just a mess today. I don't know what's going on. Woo! Right, let's try this again. Okay, we're going to look at our roles as managers, and we need to Alex, where are your words? Okay, let's try this again. Right, we now look at our roles as managers and how we should guide new generations to be fulfilled and how we should support them to invest in our own ideas, which can bring greater productivity and value to our organizations. Thank you. I can read very well. Yes, thank you. Right, and the next TED Talk, which supports this, is The Power of Small Ideas. Dave Duarte actually featured at the TEDx event in 2015 here in Cape Town, so he is a local boy. And yes, we're just going to play this for you and move on. Enjoy.
We live in fascinating times. It's true. I have no idea what jobs are going to exist in 5 years' time. In fact, in 5 years' time, I have no idea what industries are going to be born. There's new opportunities that are being created every day. People are entrepreneurs in stuff that simply didn't exist when they were at school. So as an educator, I'm really interested in how this impacts us on an individual level. How do we prepare for these jobs that don't exist in a world that's moving faster than we can keep up with it? People tell me, they're concerned that they might lose their job to software or teenagers. They're concerned that they're boring, their job's boring. They look at people with job titles like search engine optimization specialist, content strategist, personal genome consultant, you name it, and they say, well, my job existed 20 years ago, maybe I'm just boring. I mean, think about yourself. Have you ever got caught up in an online form and it asks you one thing you don't know about me and you don't know what to write? So how do you make sure that you're on the right side of this progress and not being left behind? I think that, unfortunately, there's no curriculum for stuff that we don't know. So we have to be the learn by doing generation. So today I'm going to propose a small idea. It's a small idea because it's something that we can act on. And that small idea is that side projects might be the answer to this. So a side project is something that you're curious about. It's a problem that you want to solve. It's something that you're actually interested in working on. And as you do it, it builds skills. And it might just turn into something. It's something like my friend Murray, who wants to improve his programming skills. So he decides that he's going to build a mobile game. And he sets a goal, I'm going to release this game in 6 weeks' time. And every night for a couple of hours after work, he goes on and he tries to build this thing. And every time he encounters something that he doesn't kind of know how to do, he goes and he refers to online forums and he watches videos and he goes and checks out Codecademy. Now, his app might not turn into the next Angry Birds, and it probably won't, sorry, Mary, but it will teach him the skills that he needs to bring into his work that'll improve what he does there, and it'll be of benefit to his employer and his career. So I think that our generation is less interested in what your position is and more interested in what your portfolio is. Side projects are the new CV. It's people like Lauren Björkes, the best-selling science fiction author from South Africa, who chose for her first 3 books not to be a full-time author. She felt that it would improve her writing because it didn't put the financial pressure on selling books. She could focus on the creative excellence of the work. So it can actually improve your creativity. It's people like Marlon Parker who used his side project to make the world a little bit of a better place. Marlon saw a lot of the drug abuse that was happening in the Cape Flats, and he decided to start helping in a way that was obvious to him. That's, let's use these cell phones that everyone's busy with, to start chatting with people and offering them drug support and guidance, because people can say things online that they don't feel comfortable with saying in person. So Marlon started, and he had 10 or 20 people in his first group of people. Then it got out of hand. He needed to train people to help him with it, so he got his first staff member. By the end of the year, they'd reached 50,000 people, and they had a team of people that were part-time chat supporters. By the next year, they'd expanded into HIV/AIDS counseling, debt counseling, depression counseling. They'd supported 200,000 people. The World Health Organization recognized their success. Today, our labs reaches millions of people. They've spun out numerous successful businesses. They've got retail training centers, and they have over 100 staff. This started with something completely unexpected. It's people like Ilan Lohman, who had a problem that a lot of us have. He was working too many hours. He was a senior corporate manager. He was working too many hours. He didn't find the time to stay in shape. So he did something that was really easy for any of us to do. He started a Facebook group. He invited 10 of his friends to come in, and everyone put in $500. And the person that lost the most weight after the 8-week period got to keep all the money. Nice and simple. So it was really motivating. And at the end of the 8-week period, more people wanted to join. So he ran another one. I'm going to cut to the end. Ilan's now run more than 10 of these Sleek Geek challenges. 25,000 people have participated in them, and he no longer works in that job. He's doing Sleek Geek full time. So when you look at these things, I don't think that there is anything such as a big idea really in today's world. Big ideas are just small ideas with momentum. It's small ideas that you actually start with and you let emerge. So as an educator, I've been encouraging my students to do these side projects for the last 5 years. And I've seen projects win awards. I've seen side projects accelerate people's careers. I've seen side projects turn into viable businesses. But much more than that, I've seen a lot of excuses. Things like, I don't have the time. Sure, Dave, easy for you. You're a teacher. I have a 9-to-5. So to that I say, think about someone like Lorraine Lutz, who is a student on UCT's Business Acumen for Artists program. Lorraine committed to doing one small painting a day and releasing it on Instagram. Small because that was the time that she had available. And she was working as a production manager. She would get home from work and she would paint. If she got home at 11 p.m., because it was a big day, she would paint. If she had to take clients home and it was 1 a.m., she would paint and release because that's what she had to do. And these side projects are like running a marathon. If your time is 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., you show up and you do the training, otherwise you're not going to make it through. You show up for your creativity, you show up for your project, you show up because you want to see the idea in the world, but you show up. You don't find the time, you make the time. Another thing I often hear is, I don't have the money. To that I say, think about something like Yappie Chef, one of South Africa's most loved businesses. Yappie Chef started as an agency skills building project. And the whole idea was, let's see if we can create an e-commerce business in less than a day and make a sale. So the first Yappie Chef sale was to one of the owner's mothers. So these guys didn't actually leave their jobs until it was actually able to support them. They brought all those skills in web marketing and development into their jobs. Their employers benefited. There's still a great relationship with the agency, but they're able to grow it with integrity and without pressure. Another one I hear all the time is someone else is already doing this idea. And to that I say, you know, think about Facebook. It wasn't the first social network. There was MySpace before. Google was the 10th search engine. So it doesn't matter if someone's done it before. That person isn't you, and they're not going to do it the way you're going to solve the problem. And then the other thing I hear is I started and then I realized it wouldn't work. My friends told me it wouldn't work. People said it wouldn't work. Guys, someone raised $50,000 to make a potato salad on Kickstarter this year. There's an app that I have on my phone that's a chat app that only allows you to say, yo, that's it. Like if someone had asked me for $100 to build this app, I would have been like, no, get out of here. And it's raised $1.2 million. It's Lewis Pugh who went to the Arctic to swim in frozen, like slushy water just to prove that climate change is a thing. And people said it couldn't be done. And they were probably right because no one had done it. And Lewis said, you don't focus on all the reasons why something won't work. You focus on the one reason it will. So side projects are experiments. And in experiments, there's no failure because you always learn something from an experiment. They're not big ideas. They're small ideas that you actually do something about. And that's why I love side projects. My current side project, by the way, called Twig, is a side project about side projects. So I think today we're so busy being professionals, and being a professional means you're not allowed to fail, that we forget sometimes just to be amateurs. And the root of amateur is love. It comes from the French lover of. So I believe in these labors of love. I believe in these side projects that start with a sense of curiosity, that you continue tentatively and with faith, that dispel your apathy, that excite you, that bring those skills into your work. And most importantly, In a country that has not enough jobs, but more than enough work to be done, I believe in small ideas that might, just maybe, make a big difference. Thank you.
Come on, give him a round of applause, people. He's good. I mean, there we go. I like that. Lean into it. I like that. Fully lean into it. Right. I thought it would get less weird to clap for the video. It's not getting less weird. It's my bad. It's miscalculation. Our next speaker is David Scott. He's the Director of Human Resources at RCL Foods. What we're going to look on now is we've been talking about leading with agility and probably been tweeting about it if you've been cool. Hashtag lead with agility 18. Okay. But in that process of leadership, obviously we know that leaders need followers. So what kind of people do you want to bring into your organization? So David's going to look at the types of employees that businesses need to bring in and need to work with in order to lead in these ways in trying to create a fulfilling workplace environment for a new generation of people that are coming into work in these more dynamic organizations. And you know he knows what he's talking about because he's wearing two-tone shoes. And everyone knows that the smartest people wear two-toned shoes. And you should be looking at my feet right now. Look, golf is secondary. It comes next. So I don't want to talk too much about David's shoes. He's got more important things to talk about than that. But I'd like to bring up David to the stage, please. And I have... Are you clicking? You're clicking. I knew someone was clicking. That wasn't me.
Thank you. We're gonna try to be agile. So good evening to all of you. It really is a pleasure to be with you this evening. I'd like to start off by saying that Quintus Horatius Flaccus, who is better known in the English-speaking world as Horace, who was the leading poet around about 60 BC at the time of Augustus, said, "Who knows whether the gods will add tomorrow to the present hour?" So living in a volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world is nothing new for us as human beings. Of course, what has changed is our context, and the context in which all of us operate today is very, very different. But the truth is that in our pursuit of happiness, in our pursuit of survival, and in our pursuit of belonging, we continue to face a vast mountain range of both challenges and opportunities. Of course, though, ours are firmly rooted in the 21st century. I was asked today to talk about individual leadership or individual leadership for tomorrow. And so right up front, what I'd like to assert and put forward is that although it is quite clear that businesses today have to evolve with the changing world around us, I would argue that the concept of tomorrow is much closer than we think, and in many respects, it's alive and well today. And tomorrow's tomorrow is going to look very different to the tomorrow thereafter. And so what that all means is that agility and flexibility and adaptability really are the order of the day. Now, although there are many complex and correlated macro forces that are shaping the world in which we live, I think the three most significant ones are, firstly, I guess the obvious one which we've already heard about today, and that is the massive technological advancements that are taking place. The second one, of course, is all about social and political upheaval. And then thirdly, let's not forget that there's a massive growing scarcity of natural resources. And then the fourth industrial revolution is well and truly alive. This fusion of technologies is very quickly blurring the lines between our physical, our biological, and our digital worlds. And the result of that is a level of disruption and a level of change and a level of opportunity that is literally unprecedented in the history of humankind. So although the positive impact of all of this technological change, and we've already heard about some, frankly scary and exciting things today, although the positive impact is undeniable, or at least the potential of the positive impact is undeniable, it is also true that there are many people and many fears about artificial intelligence taking over the jobs that people do today. And if jobs disappear, that means that livelihoods disappear as well. Machine learning is catching up to the human mind in a surprisingly fast way. And the question that we need to answer is, how do we, as human beings, maintain our value in a world where artificial intelligence is not just doing what we do, but quite frankly, it's doing it faster than us, it's doing it cheaper than us, and in many instances, it's doing it to a higher quality than us as well. So the perspective that I have is that the use of technology to replace human effort is actually not a new thing. And in fact, it's as old as the very first hand axe that was made of stone and produced by our ancestors more than 1.7 million years ago. And secondly, the fears about the impact of technology on human beings is also not new to us. And in fact, it was Albert Einstein who purportedly said that it's become appallingly obvious that our technology has exceeded our humanity. So the big question is, what should our response as leaders be? Personally, I think that we literally are the answer, that leaders and companies really need to start dialing up those unique skills and attributes that make us human. In short, and I think this really is the crux of my talk today, I believe that in the face of all of this disruption and these changes, now more than ever, we need to become more human. Last year, I had the absolute privilege of listening to theoretical neuroscientist, technologist, and entrepreneur, Dr. Vivian Meng, talk about how exponential technologies are helping to solve some of the world's greatest problems, or certainly have the ability to solve some of those problems. Things like energy, the need for prosperity and health. And what I loved about what Dr. Meng said is that her mission is to build what she calls augmentive reality, rather than the more commonly referenced, her mission is actually to build augmentive intelligence, not augmentive reality. And she uses that term purposefully rather than the more commonly referenced artificial intelligence, which also to some people is a little bit more scary. And at the heart of her mission is the fundamental belief that the right blend of technology, of social sciences, of human behavior, of neuroscience, and economics can fundamentally make our lives as human beings a lot better and can literally make us better people. So therefore, I would say that whilst it is inevitable that the rise of technology will replace what we do as humans, and we are already seeing that many, many jobs are changing and are being replaced. So even though that is inevitable, I also believe that that same technology will force us as humans to remain ahead of the curve. And what we'll do is we'll, by definition of who we are, continue to use our unique human attributes to invent new jobs, to invent new economies, and also it will reinforce those endless passions that we have, those human creations such as art, such as literature, such as music and entertainment. And let's also not forget, it'll reinforce for us that ultimate human ethic of love and connection. So I guess the real question is, what are some of these human attributes that need to be amplified? The first one is that by definition, we are by nature as humans, we are dreamers, we are explorers, and we are pioneers. We are designed at our core to take risks. And believe it or not, we are also designed to make a difference to the world and to make a difference to humanity. Secondly, we are, again, by nature, we are creative, we are imaginative, we are persistent, we are humorous, we are caring, and yes, despite what you might read every single day, by design, we are ethical. The third attribute that I relate to a lot is, because I'm holding my crutches over here, is we are endearing in our perfect imperfection. And human beings certainly have and will continue to create lots of machines, and as time goes on, I think those machines will be perfect, and by design they will need to be perfect. But as human beings, we are not designed to be perfect, and in fact, I believe we'll get to a place where we will revel even more in our imperfection than we ever have. We have the ability to sniff out and make sense of new information. And this is something that we've done for a very, very long time. To literally find new information, or where we get new information that will come from artificial intelligence and from robots, to literally develop new insights from that information. That's what we're capable of doing. And then finally, we'll continue to leverage all of this wonderful technology, which frankly, we as human beings have invented and have advanced. We'll continue to leverage that to reimagine completely disruptive and creative new business models that, guess what, will ultimately benefit all of us as well. And I guess my favorite is that all of the attributes I've just described literally come packaged in the form of billions of wonderfully diverse and colorful individuals whose collective impact on our world can be gargantuan. Ladies and gents, I thought that instead of using the limited time that I have available today to continue to philosophize on what it means to be more human, I'd now shift and share with you some practical ideas and insights that I think in many respects can be a leadership call to action. Now, I've personally experienced the power of some of these ideas in practice, and I've seen the benefits. I've also read with a lot of interest and excitement about others. And in fact, the side project that we heard about a little bit earlier, I think is a great example. And I've also been dreaming of, I guess, and peddling, admittedly with mixed reactions, yet others. I'd like to start with trust. Neuroeconomist, author, and entrepreneur Paul J. Zak has conducted research which has concluded that building a culture of trust has got the most significant impact on collaboration, on advocacy, and for all the capitalists amongst us, ultimately on productivity in businesses. Now, Zak also, when he conducted his neuroscience experiments, he discovered many strategies for how you can build trust in the workplace and amongst human beings. But there are two in particular that I want to elaborate on today. The first one is to recognize excellence. Now, many companies, and for those of you, that are working for big corporates, many of our companies have got recognition programs in place. But by my experience, a lot of those recognition programs, although well-intended, are often a little bit contrived, a little bit bureaucratic, and sometimes quite process-driven or tick box. When Zak conducted his research, what he found is that for recognition to have the most significant impact on trust and therefore build the culture that will benefit organizations, it should be, first of all, timely. It should ideally be peer-to-peer. It should certainly be tangible. And finally, ideally, it should be public. And just one example of that is the very well-known international online retailer Zappos. So what they've got, like every other big companies, they've got a performance management and bonus scheme for all of the employees. But what's really great about their particular scheme, just as one example, and there are thousands of these, is that they've got a co-worker bonus scheme that allows every single worker in their business to award $50 a month to a fellow co-worker who has gone above and beyond. And they are totally empowered to do that very spontaneously the way that I've described it. The second way to build a culture of trust is to allow people in companies to craft their own jobs. And as you heard from Dave Duarte, and by the way, I love the concept of the side project. So the rationale behind this is really simple but powerful, and that is, if you allow people in organizations to work on the projects that they want to work on, not only do they tend to focus on things that they're good at, but even more importantly, what they focus on are the things that they care about. And you heard some examples a little bit earlier, and there are numerous examples of where this is successful. So everything from LinkedIn's incubator program to Microsoft's The Garage, and you would have heard about others. But the common factor in all of these is that the companies that do these sorts of things place value in giving their employees literally time and space and resources to work on these projects. And the result of that is twofold, is not only do you create high levels of trust in organizations, but what you also get is you get high levels of innovation, and so the business also benefits. Moving on, virtually every single human being has an innate need, and again, this is how we're designed. We have an innate need for inclusion and belonging. And I really fundamentally believe that leaders for today and for tomorrow should look to dial the power of this up in their organizations for the benefit of those organizations. So amongst all of the great ways to build inclusion and belonging, I thought I'd share with you just briefly 2 practical ideas again. The first one, and this is probably my favorite, the one that I feel most passionate about, having worked in corporate life for the last 20 years, and that is to get rid of labels. Literally get rid of labels. How many companies, and how many of the companies that you work for have got a plethora of labels that are used, somewhat ironically, to describe talent in those organizations? Those labels are everything from, ridiculous concepts such as high potential, hypo, top performer, green box, top box, middle box, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the problem with all of these labels is that the truth is, the ones that most people aspire to, which are the positive labels, of course, are also the ones that are usually reserved for the top 20 to 30% of people in an organization. And the net result of that is that you actually end up making the vast majority of your so-called valuable employees in your organization simply feel average. And I don't know about you, but I don't think feeling average or inadvertently making people feel average feels human at all. So my advice is to cull the labels and to start to talk to people directly and in a personal way about their performance, their development, and even their mistakes. If you do that in a way that is credible and personal, you'll build a massive culture of inclusion and belonging. Another technique for upping inclusion and belonging, and this is something that I've personally facilitated very successfully on numerous occasions, is to empower people by literally giving them a voice and a choice through a technique called open space methodology to run meetings and workshops. So this is a very practical thing. The premise behind open space methodology, which I found works particularly well in getting people to engage around strategy. So the premise is that you start with a very big, complex, tough problem that by definition isn't easy to solve, and where you require genuinely the input of large groups of people. But instead of the typical conference or meeting where people rock up and what managers do is top management decides what the agenda is for the day, you literally start with a blank agenda. So all you've got is this big, hairy problem, and you ask all of the employees in the room to decide the agenda for the day or for the 2 days or for the week themselves that they think is important for solving that particular problem. But it goes one step further. Not only do you empower those team members to decide the agenda, but they are then also completely empowered and free to participate in whichever of the discussions they wish to participate in. And what I have seen time and time again is not only, and I don't know why this is surprising, but to many managers it is surprising, not only do you get amazing insights, because managers quickly realize, oops, we didn't have all the answers. Some of those employees have got some great insights. Not only do you find that, but what you get is you get very high levels of ownership and, of course, high levels of belonging. The third strategy that I'd like to emphasize for, once again, amplifying this notion of more human in the workplace is to start focusing much more on developing leaders with vulnerability. Dr. Brené Brown, some of you might know about, who's a world-renowned professor in sociology and a best-selling author, which is all based on research, of books such as The Daring Way, has got an amazing conclusion. And her conclusion, which is all based on research, is that vulnerability is the birthplace of connection. And so I really would encourage, leaders, and I would encourage people that are putting in place leadership development programs to really embrace this notion of vulnerability, because when a leader is prepared to stand up in front of the people that work for him or her and to show that they are human, that they too make mistakes, that they too do the things that normal human beings do in their imperfections, what they are doing is not only are they creating a greater connection with the people that work for them, but they're also giving everybody else in their organization permission to be themselves, to show up with all of their imperfections and to be the very best version of themselves that they can be. Now, to me, that sounds not only like a good idea for driving good business and good leadership, but I think it sounds very human at the same time. The fourth strategy in the quest to being more human involves dialing up purpose and meaning. So this is the point at which I'd like to use the opportunity that I've got to briefly talk about the different generations in the workplace. A number of weeks ago, I was lucky enough to listen to a talk by well-known South African trend forecaster Dion Chang, who some of you might be aware of. And the title for his talk was called New Urban Tribes of South Africa. And in amongst all of the really interesting and fascinating trends that Dion was forecasting, at one stage he boldly said, "Goodbye, millennials." And I can see many millennials in the crowd here today. So what he said is, he said, "Goodbye, millennials, and hello to Generation Z, also known as the I generation." And just one interesting statistic is that by 2020, which is literally around the corner, 40% of consumers in the USA will be Generation I or Generation Z. And not only that, but that generation will very quickly start to become a major driving force in every organization around the world, including in South Africa. Now, what is unique about Generation Z is that Generation Z is the generation that has literally inherited a broken planet. And Generation Z is not just tech savvy, but is, what I like to call literally tech infused or tech saturated in everything that they do. But this is also the generation that is going to place an absolute premium on things like activism. And so what you're already seeing is child activists. These are people that are 13 or 14 already being activists, with hundreds of thousands of followers in some instances on YouTube and in other places. So not only will they not be afraid to be activists for the things that they believe in, but they will actively seek out to work with or work for, because they probably won't be working 9 to 5 for an organization, but to work with and for organizations who at their heart have got a genuine purpose, or at the very least, allow those employees, those Generation Zs, to fulfill some level of purpose themselves. So I really think this is something that leaders for tomorrow need to look at dialing up. The fifth strategy is about making employee engagement real. I remember recently reading an article on LinkedIn, and in fact I didn't read the whole article, to be honest. I scanned through it, but what really struck me, because it really resonated, is that in this article, and I can't remember who wrote it, I apologize to the author of the article, but in essence they said that companies used to be square boxes and are now glass boxes. And the reason I think this is such a profound statement is that in this day and age, what you still have is you have a whole bunch of companies who put a lot of time, money, and effort into marketing themselves to the outside world, through things like employer branding. Or as an HR person, and I apologize to my fellow HR professionals, but one of our favorites is the good old employee value proposition. And what we do is we create posters, to get people excited about what we have to offer. But the truth is that people external to companies, particularly given the power of social media today, actually can see through all of that and absolutely know about a company's real values and their real culture. And so when they're standing around a braai, or whether they're having dinner, or whether they're meeting in Tasha's or wherever it is, they are talking, and normally quite accurately, about what culture a company really, really has. And so my advice is therefore to stop the fluff and to stop the campaigns and focus much more on building a culture of engagement that is based on real relationships and real values. Now, in my own organization, one of the things that we're doing, and once again you'll see this is not a new concept, but I think it's so relevant and so powerful, is we are using the power of storytelling to make our company's version of values and DNA come alive. And yes, we do have our values written down on posters and on PowerPoint, but what we're doing is we're using storytelling to make it come alive. And the way that we're doing that is we're getting all of our employees to tell their own stories. And our belief is that by everybody telling their own story, they will ultimately tell the story of our company. Ladies and gentlemen, I've literally scratched the surface in terms of what it means to be more human. What I would say is the good news is that as human beings, being human isn't foreign to us. It's what we do. It literally is who we are. And so I would encourage every single leader to adopt that as a core mantra of their own strategies and to make it come alive. And I'd like to end today by just quoting the words of the late Stephen Hawking, who said, "We are very, very small, but we are profoundly capable of very, very big things." Thank you very much.
We thank you very much, David. Really appreciate that. That was awkward. We have our first raffle of the evening. If you lost this, I have it. This is a very technical raffle. Did someone leave this somewhere downstairs? It's a lovely GS. Is it yours? I'm judging you. I'm judging you right now. Okay. You can come find it for me later. Not as exciting as the iPhone raffle we had earlier. This is much lower stakes, I have to say. Let me just click ahead. Sorry, I've got too many things in my hand now. Hold on one second. Our next speaker is actually someone I'm really excited to bring up because she is a colleague of mine at the GSB. Heard her talk a couple times, and I think she's fantastic. She's doing amazing work for us. She's the director for the Bertha Center for Social Innovation at the GSB. It's something we're very proud of at the GSB, and I think they do amazing work. She is going to talk about sort of exploring the role of businesses within their operating context. providing ways for companies to leverage their core activities and a means to create value for the communities that surround them, a responsibility needed to enable the African continent to reach its full potential. So it's very much my pleasure, and she deserves hazard pay today because she's twinged her back, Bulelwa Ngewana.
Right, thank you. It's really good to be here. How many of you are actually owning businesses or thinking of owning businesses? Why are the hands tentative? You need to be bold and say you are, okay? So I'm hoping that maybe some of this conversation today that in terms of my topic might actually help, but in any case, let's see how it goes. So, I've always believed that the business of business is business. I had that very early on in my career, and I made a decision because my happy place is not numbers. My happy place is words. I like books, I like to read, I like words. And so I realized that the world of business is not mine. So I made a decision to spend most of my career in the non-profit sector, except for 6 years, where I owned my own business, consulting as a town planner. I grew the business from 2 people to 16 people over a period of 6 years. But I started very early on, and I was very young. I knew nothing about numbers. I was under the impression that in order to do good in the business, I needed to put my heart in it, I needed to drive it, I needed to live it. I became a caretaker for 16 people at the age of 30. And I realized that I couldn't really carry this burden of thinking that what I wanted to do with my life needed to be so intertwined with what my employees wanted. And it's not just my employees, it's the families of my employees. And this became quite an overwhelming burden. So when I stopped, I said, I'm going back to the nonprofit world. It's because I truly believe in my heart that you can't do good if you are in business. Well, I stand before you today believing truly that actually that is not true. Because I've seen what business can do when business actually takes doing good into the core of their business. I currently chair a board of an asset management company. It's a South African-based company, but they're actually quite international in their footprint. When they invited me, it's a firm of engineers. They employ about 500 engineers. They invited me to chair their Africa board. First of all, I was very suspicious. I said, why? Why me? Really, is this like some kind of gender, racial washing thing? And they said, no, we want you to come because we want to think outside the box. We are engineers, and as engineers, we only see things in one perspective. So you come and disrupt us at a board level so that we can hear how we can be able to think outside the box as engineers. And today, that company has actually, I've been chairing that board now for 3 years. It's a hard, harsh environment. But what they do with their business is exciting to me, which is why I keep going back and I keep saying, yes, I'll extend my term, Because, let me just make an example. So they decided, for example, that as an asset management company, there is a shortage of skills in South Africa, even though there are so many unemployed engineers that have been produced by tertiary institutions. And they've discovered that they can't use the product that is being produced because these engineers that are produced are unemployable. The skill they come out with from university is so theoretical that it's impossible for you to use. And so all their clients in the oil and gas environment, in the retail environment are saying we need skills that are appropriate. And so if you can produce these skills for us rather than selling us services, we will be able to increase the contracts that we take with you. And so they started an academy last year. And in that academy last year, they had an intake of about 40 engineers that were unemployed. They came from university, they retrained them in order to work in a Mercedes-Benz environment, in a Shell environment, in a Checkers environment. And suddenly, their marketing of themselves as a company just grew exponentially because now the clients were saying, you are not only providing us the skill and the competencies, but you're also providing us the staff that we need. So we no longer have to import skills from India or from China because those skills are available in South Africa. And now, today, in fact, in the last board meeting that we had last week, their academy is now, has an intake of 500 engineers that are already pre-booked in terms of employment. When I talk about doing good when you're doing business, that's what I mean. It's not about a CSI environment where you put aside a bit of a project, you give it to somebody, and you make the brand, wash your brand so that you appear to be doing good while actually carrying on with your business. I wake up every day thinking that as humanity, we seem to have taken all our eggs and put them in very limited baskets. Politically, when we think about what is the political solution, I mean, I've worked out in Africa a lot, and I've always thought that when you talk about politics and what is the best political environment, it needs to be a democratic environment. Trust me, just look at Trump. No solution there. You know, when we talk about capitalism, that's the only system that can really work. It's actually not. I truly believe that you are able to look at new solutions and new systems. We need to be able to rely heavily on businesses, big businesses especially, but also small businesses, to be able to disrupt government, to be able to disrupt civil society, and come up with innovative ideas that allow us to be able to sustain ourselves as humanity going forward. I work at the Better Center. We truly believe in social innovation and entrepreneurship. I'm not going to go through a lot of what we do because we're running out of time, but as a center, we really see ourselves as providing a platform for action for social innovation system, looking at how we integrate and include and innovate in various ways, whether it's the world of finance, it's the world of education, it's the world of placemaking, urban management, that sort of thing, because we really truly believe that if you are able to support businesses, which are enterprises that design themselves in solving all these societal problems that we're facing, while being able to make money while they're doing it, that's the future. And that's where we actually can see ourselves getting out of some of these big societal problems that we're facing. So our areas of work as a Better Center, we teach, we research, we convene, and we carry out catalytic projects. We take that definition in terms of what we describe as social innovation, but really our work is to look at existing system and find out a way of correcting that system or transforming the system through disruption and being able to support partners or grow partners that are able to do so. You will ask, what is social innovation? This is the best way I can describe it. You have a social problem, which requires a lot of multi-stakeholder stakeholder engagement to be able to solve it. You bring together a group of people, or you are a person who can then be able to connect with other people who think alike, who can then generate novel ideas. Those novel ideas are tested, they have an impact that is measurable, they are scalable, they have durability, and they transform the way we think about how we do things. And suddenly you are able to change minds, you are able to change the world, you are able to come up with new human networks, and it's a people-centered solution that actually drives your business. And suddenly we find ourselves with new innovative services that actually can be seen as solutions that can be able to solve our issues that we face as humanity and society, while we are able to make money while doing so. And so suddenly we have sustainable businesses that are socially innovative, that are empowering and driving change in society. I just want to highlight some of the entrepreneurs that are in our midst. Some of them, a lot of the ones that I'm talking about now are those that we've actually supported in their studies. We've supported in incubating them as small entrepreneurs. We've actually, most of them, we've actually put money in their business, because in order to support an emerging business, you need to be able to hold the hand of the person who's driving that business for a while until they can grow. So I want to talk about Jonga, which is a low-cost security system for township residents. It was started as part of our UCT Upstart program. They've received further funding through a student social innovation venture program. They've won the Sanlam Safety Ideas campaign. In 2018, they've received 100,000 funding in order to scale up their businesses. They've looked at what is security in a township space, and how do you provide security in a low-income space. We have, I know all of you here probably know about the security system that operates in private spaces. How do we translate that and bring that same model in a low-income space so that you can be able to provide security while being able to make money. The other one is Regenerize. They also are part of our currently incubated entrepreneurs. They're in the recycling business. They've looked at ways of making money through recycling, especially using low-income solutions. And again, you can see what their credentials are on screen. There's another one, housing. I'm a town planner by profession, so I come from the world of housing. I gave up on housing because our South African solution in terms of low-income housing provided through government is just a self-defeating strategy. You build them because you build these houses because you think that they actually are an asset that can lift people out of poverty. It seldom is. It actually brings people back into poverty. And usually what happens is that you build this asset, give it to pay to someone who is in a low-income space, who doesn't earn much money, and you think that by giving them the asset, you're actually helping them out of poverty. What happens is that they leave the asset and rent it out, and they build another shack. So it just becomes a very self-defeating secular movement. So this is a business that is actually disrupting that, and is making money while doing so. Again, another one around urban farming. I come from the Eastern Cape, so I grow things as a hobby. And so farming is in my heart and in my head. And so this sort of businesses really excite me. So why are social entrepreneurs really able to solve problems that are perplexing and that usually confound experienced bureaucrats and companies? I truly believe it's because their value system is driven by a full understanding and belief in their ability to really be able to solve society's problems. And therefore, the way they make money is because it's entwined with what is really hardwired into their minds, to find new ways of doing things that can, new ways of changing the system, and being able to find solutions that are really particular especially to low-income areas. I can't conclude this without talking about my pet project, which is Philippi. So Graduate School of Business has got a site in Philippi. And it's a site that is vibrant. I don't know if you've never been, please talk to me. I'll arrange for you to actually visit and see what's happening on site. In Cape Town, and I've lived in Cape Town for 20 years, in a space of about 4.5 million people, it's surprising how many of those people don't cross between these two spaces. The people who live on this side of the mountain seldom go to the other side of the mountain. And someone in Philippi, even though they heard about UCT, for them UCT might as well be in Australia. Because to come from that side of the mountain to this side of the mountain, given the complexity of our transportation system, and also given the fact that really just to get to UCT is such a struggle, it is an impossible task. Imagine therefore when GSB and UCT are actually in your community. Suddenly, they are physically accessible as a space, as an institution. What does that do to a graduate of UCT or GSB? It actually means that for once you can actually go out there and say, I have an edge. Because I just didn't only learn in the classroom, but I actually have been living the ability to change societal issues while being able to learn in a classroom situation. And in terms of the competition of graduates of business schools, I think it is important to actually be able to have relevance, and that relevance is the platform that you plan, so you physically showcase by having a footprint in a place like Philippi. Philippi is a place which is, in my view, is even worse than normal township areas because it's completely forgotten. It has no a discernible ambassador, whether in government or in private sector or in civil society. There are books and books that have been written about how many interventions have gone to Philippi to fail. And so for GSB to be able to say we want to be in Philippi, for me is a very, very exciting exciting action, because it actually says if we are able to survive and thrive and build a campus that actually allows GSB to have a direct impact in a low-income community that is visible, and be able to showcase that to our students and scholars, it means that we are, in fact, walking the talk and being able to showcase how we walk that talk. And we are not just at the waterfront, because really, somebody said at the beginning, you know, South Africa is not Africa, and trust me, Cape Town is not South Africa either. And so you do need to be able to kind of to find a way of bridging these two spaces in a way that is synergistic and that is not cannibalizing the relationship, that is symbiotic, so that there is value in that relationship for both the community of Philippi and GSB and UCT. Thank you. I mean, I just want to end with that quote that we can't solve our problems with the same thing we had and we've created. And I truly believe that social innovation and special entrepreneurs in social innovation do exactly that. Thanks.
We got you up. I don't want to. All right. Cheers. Thanks so much. I'll give you that. I've got all the microphones.
You do. Thank you so much. I found that incredibly inspirational, and I can't wait to chat to you at the networking afterwards. So, to wrap up, we have a 5-minute insert of Fred Swaneke's talk about leadership in Africa, which which also resonates personally with me, and I think it will with you as well. And afterwards, we're going to be having a panel discussion. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please hashtag leadwithagility18, and we'll look at those afterwards. Okay, 5th time.
Leaders make a difference in every society. But I believe that in Africa, more than anywhere else in the world, leaders, just one person, one good leader, can have much more impact in Africa than anywhere else in the world. And here's why. There's something that we call institutions that exist in every society. Institutions are the rules and the systems that govern how a society functions. So these are things like your constitution, the media, the judiciary, the parliament system, all of those things. The rule that I believe is that the stronger the institutions in a given country, the less effect one leader can have in that country. And therefore, by the inverse of that means that the weaker the institutions in a country, the much, much more powerful effect that just one person can have in that society. So, when you look at a developed country like the UK, your parliament, Big Ben, you walk past that place, it's been around for 500 years. You look at the US, got very developed systems. So if you become the president of the United States, and you think, oh, I've arrived, I'm the most powerful man in the world, and you decide, okay, I think Americans should get health care. I'm going to pass a law to make this possible. You go to the Senate, they say, no, 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 you can't do that. You go to the Congress, they say, no, you can't do that. If you decide that you want to become president for life, there's a 300-year-old constitution that will stop that. There's a very powerful police force, and so that will come and take you out of that Oval Office. If you decide you want to print money, and you call Ben Bernanke or Alan Greenspan, the central bank governor, they'll say, are you smoking crack? You come to Africa, the situation is different. If you are the president of Zimbabwe, and you decide that, you know what, I just want to stay in power forever. There's no constitution that's going to stop you. And you just stay on and on and on and on, like the Energizer Bunny. If you decide that you want to print money, and you call your central bank governor, the guy will say, okay, yes, sir, how much do you need? And as a result, hyperinflation ensues in that country. And so the lack of these institutions in Africa have meant that our leaders have had tremendous impact on us. Just one person, like Robert Mugabe, can destroy an entire country. And this is why I say that leaders in Africa can have much more impact than anywhere else in the world. They are really the ultimate ripple effect in Africa. And this is why myself and my peers were really inspired to develop the African Leadership Academy. When we realized that this was the single biggest thing that was holding us back from achieving our potential as Africans, was the quality of the leaders that we had. We said, do we just sit back and hope that one day we get good leaders? Or can we create a system, a machine, that can actually find young people and develop hundreds and thousands of young people like Joseph, who each in their own way, I looked in my lifetime when I was growing up, I grew up in different parts of Africa. And everywhere I went, I saw we had different problems: healthcare, infrastructure, poverty, housing, sanitation, and it was overwhelming. Where would I start? But I thought, there's no way in my lifetime that I can try and tackle all these things. But if I can produce a set of leaders, and those leaders, this one will take the infrastructure, that one will take politics, this one will take healthcare, this one will take education, and each and every one of them, in their way, will go out, and they will become the leaders that can really transform Africa. And as I mentioned, just one leader in Africa can have a very, very powerful effect on that society. And that's really what inspired the African Leadership Academy. Today we get several thousand applications, and we pick only 100. People say, how can 100 people change Africa? I say that we don't need a lot of people to transform Africa. We just need a few good leaders. So when you walk into the walls of the African Leadership Academy, everywhere there's a quote that I like, that is all over the place. It's my favorite quote. It says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. I believe in Africa, I would rewrite that statement that says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed leaders can change Africa. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever will. Thank you.
Okay, so in the next 2 minutes, I think, we're going to have a panel discussion. We're just going to set things up. And yeah, if you want to stretch your legs and go to the bathroom, you're welcome to do so.
So thank you very much. We've just got a few questions that we're going to go through. This sounds almost like it's going to be a test or something. It's not a test. There's no grades for this. But there's just a few questions that were sent via Twitter to us that we're going to ask our panelists to just get their insights on. Sorry, I flipped my script and now I need to look at this. We've had panelists that you've heard from before, and I'm going to try to get her name right, and she's going to correct me when I get it wrong, but she's going to do it nicely. Okay. So, joining us, who wasn't with us before, is a senior manager at Deloitte, who is obviously a partner with us on our presentation today and putting this all together. So thank you very much for representing Deloitte. Is Nthabiseng? Nthabiseng? Okay, I'm getting there. Mothoagae. Almost. Baby steps, baby steps. I took a whole course on Xhosa, and then as she said that, and it's still not right because I'm in the wrong, you see it, then it's Botswana. I'll get there someday. I need 4 more years, just 4 more years, and then I'm going to nail it all. Yeah, thank you so much. So thank you very much to all of our panelists for joining us. So we've got a bunch of questions sent on Twitter. Obviously, we can't get to all of them. So we've tried to tackle some that we think are the most compelling. So I think one of the things that came through very strongly in the first section of tonight's presentation was around tech and innovation and these new ideas. And what we talked a lot about in the second half is then the human side. You know, humanity, how do we connect people? How do we make people feel engaged and appreciated and treated well? So how would you all approach that challenge of bringing together this tech and this innovation in a place like South Africa? Whereas I always say, I haven't lived in South Africa, I've lived in Cape Town. and I also live by the waterfront, which is also not Cape Town. It's a different part of. So how do we make sure that this new tech and innovation that we sort of talk about actually lands with human beings in a place like this? Yeah, you're in control now.
Yeah. Actually, it's quite easy. In a way, you know, opportunities that are presented through human frailty and societal challenges, a lot of those challenges can be solved through technology. It's about finding the right minds to understand the environment within which these problems are happening and be able to come up with technological solutions to that. I mean, the fact that right in this day and age, you can be able to get a script served to you in a township via an ATM-like machine is already mind-boggling. So there are many, many of these solutions. I mean, I've seen them in Philippines, for example, in terms of our social innovators, where they are able to bring, so there's one guy who's built an app that allows small businesses to collaborate with big businesses, small businesses that would never actually have seen each other, but through this app they're able to. When I wanted to move furniture, I didn't go and look for a handyman or whatever, a Gumtree. I went to that app, and the guy who delivered my furniture to me came from Khayelitsha and delivered on time. My furniture was not scratched, and the price that I paid was so cost effective. And I only saw him through that app. And so these solutions are possible. So there are collaborating businesses now through that app, like businesses in Stellenbosch who are collaborating with businesses in Khayelitsha who would never be able to have that relationship before, but through this technology they're able to do so.
Thank you.
All right. So I guess the key thing for me would be to just say that we should not be afraid of technology. We should not be afraid of what technology brings to the table. And in fact, as many speakers said before, advancements in technology have been happening over the years, and they will continue to happen. And the reality is that as humans, we control a lot of that, and a lot of that thinking and that ideation comes from humans. So from a Deloitte perspective, we always try and see how do you actually incorporate that kind of thinking in your organization, in the fabric of your organization. And as leaders, it's around some of the stuff that was talked about, the previous speakers who talked about inclusivity. So if you're talking about millennials and the Generation Z, they're very eager to solve some of the social challenges we have. So how do we as leaders in organizations use them to actually unlock the power of technology and not be stifled by fear that technology is actually going to take away jobs and change the way that we currently operate, because that's going to happen anyways.
David, do you want to dive in, or are you?
I'm happy to.
Is that a pass? That's a pass. Yeah. Okay, that's okay. It's okay. It's not for points. It's not for points. You're still in the running for the win. It's okay. It's okay. So I think related to this issue, when I moved down here, so I've lived in a bunch of different places around the world, and one of the things that we talk about a lot here in South Africa is the Gini coefficient. So the gap between the haves and the have-nots in South Africa is almost on an annual basis the worst, or at least amongst the worst. This year, I believe it is the worst. It's about 0.65 at the moment. So for people, again, for people on Facebook, I don't know who I'm talking to now, but the Gini coefficient is basically an analysis of the difference between the wealthiest people in a country and the poorest people in the country. And that as that gap gets bigger, that number gets bigger. So 0.65 is the worst in the world at the moment in South Africa. To give you some context, the UK and the US are on 0.35 and 0.45. So again, not exactly beacons of equality there either, as much as they like to think they are. But obviously we have a lot of work to do in South Africa. But it's been that way for a long time. Apartheid is over, but we have the remnants, and whether that's spatial, whether that's economic, whether that's perceptions of our fellow humans, all those issues. So I think one of the questions I teach a class on leadership in organizations. So from your point of view, what's the biggest challenge, for a leader that's going out there, and we like to think we're producing leaders from the business school, what's the biggest challenge you see for them to try to make that 0.60 next year, or 0.55, and start bringing that? How do we address that gap as leaders?
I mean, somebody said at the beginning of this process, of these presentations today, that Africa is a place of scarcity and abundance. I do think that we need to change to see, from seeing the people who live below the income, the tax bracket, as people who need to be saved, but rather see them as business opportunities, for business to be able to make money. Actually, you know, let me just maybe explain this better in terms of anecdotes. You know, when I go to Philippi twice a week since the beginning of this year, and I've seen how small businesses are able to grow almost overnight because they see the opportunity within their communities and they survive. Those people are not in the tax bracket. Who in this room is an expert on the secondary economy, who understands how it works, who understands how it thrives, and who's able to say, within that secondary economy, here are the opportunities. Think about the hair business in South Africa. I mean, really, I go and spend so much money doing my hair, right?
I don't understand what you're saying.
Exactly. Okay. It's a cash business. It's a cash business, and they thrive, they survive, they employ people. Look at the taxi industry. Look at how much money flows through that industry. But we haven't been able to mine it appropriately. I'm not saying the Gini coefficient is not true. It is true, but I think somehow we're very pessimistic in the way we look at it. So we need to kind of turn the equation on its head and be able to figure out, where are these opportunities? How are we able to thrive in those environments? Because trust me, when you are able to make your business thrive in that environment, guess what? It's scalable now. It can be applicable in any South African context, as well as in most African contexts. And so somehow you really would be able to break that back where it says, you know, you either function on this side of the economy or on that side of the economy, and there isn't any bridge between the two.
Yes, I think it's a great question, and it certainly is something that's close to my heart. So I returned with my family from the UK, where we lived and worked for 4 years, 2 years ago. It's almost 2 years ago. And I can remember having so many debates, you know, with various people about why we were coming back, and knowing what we were coming back to. And I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but from, you know, my perspective and my wife's perspective, it's really because we wanted to make a difference. And I think that's where the challenge lies. So if you had to ask me personally, I think the biggest challenge is, how do leaders genuinely instill a sense of purpose into the heart of every single business? And I personally believe that for any business to be sustainably profitable into the future of this particular country, the challenges that all those businesses need to be willing to face up to are those things that have got to do with inequality. And there's different ways that you can do that. You know, our challenge isn't, you know, it isn't, with all due respect, about, you know, we don't have the same environmental challenges, for example. I know the planet has that, but ours is about inequality. And so I think it is about finding ways to put that purpose at the heart of businesses. And that's difficult, because it's probably going to mean doing things differently. You know, and one example of that, which I know sounds controversial, you know, and one of my jobs is to drive efficiency in our business, because that's what shareholders want, and I get it. But for example, you know, there's new legislation about to come out on a new minimum wage, which is causing lots of ripples, and I get it, particularly for a lot of small companies. You know, in my mind, what I'd love to see is companies actually saying, why don't we set ourselves the bar higher? Why don't we rather aim for a living wage, not a minimum wage, and reverse engineer that and say, what would it take for our company to still be profitable, still deliver for shareholders, but be able to pay everybody, you know, a living wage as opposed to a minimum wage? I think that's the challenge, and it's not easy.
Yeah, I think this is also one that's very personal to me as well. And I think one of the biggest things I realize with every industrial revolution is that it presents an opportunity for a country, for an organization, for us as individuals to really redefine how we want to see societies, redefine what's important. So the education system, if we're talking about Industry 4.0, what are the next careers that are coming up, and how do we actually start training up people in our communities and societies as part of giving back to society to be included in that next revolution within our countries, within our organizations. So what are the social programs or initiatives that you need to undertake to make sure that you're training up people that are less privileged so that they can actually actively play in the economy going forward? So these type of revolutions present that kind of opportunities for us, and the reality is that it's up to us to take them up as individuals, as organizations, as leaders, or we can let the opportunities pass again, and then that coefficiency will get more and more disparate. So it's really in our hands to see how we actually take the opportunity up.
That's great. Thanks for it. Really interesting. I mean, I think tying in with our theme of leading with agility, it's just rethinking things. So stop seeing it as the gap. Stop thinking about the minimum wage as the minimum we should shoot for. And I think, rethinking what is the education process that we actually need. And I think that's, for me, just all those three things is one of the biggest challenges. Just how do we rethink something that we've seen for so many generations that's just the way it is, and trying to turn that and sort of move into a new space. So really appreciate that. The last question that I thought was quite interesting that came up during one of the videos was about the social credit score in China, which, you think in some ways, again, it is made the video, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, that's incredibly terrifying at the same time. So if there was a social credit score, what do you think we should value in human behavior? What would you want to have people be rewarded for? What are the things that, again, I work in an education space, so what are the things we should be encouraging people as they go through our systems to be doing? Not necessarily to get them discounts on airplane tickets, but if we were going to put into place, what would you want people to be doing out there in the world?
Look, I'm going to just paraphrase it because I've already spoken and I know I overshot the time. I apologize. Thanks for giving me some back. What I would summarize it at, this is just shooting from the hip, is I always like to think, especially in the context of the Fourth Industrial Revolution and all of this, about the 3 C's, connection, connectivity, and caring. And for me, those are the 3 that I would place a premium on, because I think if we as human beings can get those right, and we can leverage this amazing technology, I think the planet and humanity is in good shape. So those would be my 3.
I think in a South African context, in a South African context, really, we should be rewarded when we stop seeing each other through the same lenses. Black and white, educated, uneducated, rich, poor. Because it's those artificial boundaries, which are actually real boundaries, that actually prevent us from moving forward. So when we talk about social cohesion in South Africa, we are still wearing the same glasses of interpreting that phrase. And so I'm not going to talk about what the world needs. I'm going to talk about what we need here. We're getting angrier and angrier, and the divisions are getting deeper and deeper. And I'm losing hope in terms of my own children being able to see beyond those boundaries. So never mind the fact that from a town planning perspective, our cities are designed for apartheid. I know that we are separated from each other in terms of class, in terms of race, geographically speaking. And if you live in Cape Town, that's even impossible because we're squeezed between the mountain and the sea, and the space is not that, there isn't a lot of space, quite frankly. And so if you have separation in terms of physical spaces, but you also have separation in terms of psychological and societal perceptions, it becomes impossible to see how we're ever going to move beyond where we are. And I know it's idealistic because, America, look at it. They're still having race issues to these days, and you would think that their liberation came earlier than where we are, than ours in South Africa. So this is not an easy question to resolve. But if we're just able to just turn the lenses a little bit and see each other as different, beyond what the boundaries are physically, maybe we could move forward.
Sure, I think I can't follow that on. It's actually such a really good point. Yeah, so I think it also actually speaks to what David talked about earlier around humanity, not losing our humanity. And I think if we can, at the end of the day, keep that within the fiber of our society, that's definitely a good starting point for me. Yeah.
Thank you all very much. And we're going to take, I think we have time for one question maybe from the audience. Does anyone have a burning question that they didn't tweet to us? I've said 2 hands, and I know him, and I taught him, so I'm not going to pick him. You see what I did? He's had his chance in class. Is it okay if we don't get to your question? Are you going to judge me later? It's fine. Okay, we'll hug it out. Okay.
Okay, my name is Mila. I do my master's in adult education at the University of Cape Town, and it became a social enterprise. I teach sewing and business skills in the townships. I have a stall afterwards. You can also see.
It's a business event. Sell, sell, sell.
Yeah. I'd like to speak to you. I even saw you, but I didn't have the opportunity to introduce myself to you during the women's celebration at Philippe Village.
Oh.
I also find the space amazing. It's in the middle of the townships, so it's very convenient for us who want to work with those kind of people, because I really didn't have, I live here for 14 years, and I didn't have any idea, as you said, about transport. We really have to be there, and not them have to be here. Even events like this, I don't know we run here and not there. It's just my suggestion. What I'd like to ask you, why the rent is still so high there, the containers? Because it's 1,500 rand a month. And even my organization, we couldn't rent it yet. And what I've noticed, they rent it for 2 months. Fortunately, you let us go out before 1 year lease without charging us the fine. But it's still, they open and close, and they are losing hope. So it's a problem, because if you go to Philippe Village, I'm not criticizing, but you see lots of containers empty, and it's heartbreaking.
It's interesting. There's a tenant who's asking a tenant about the rent. Okay. We are also a tenant. Yeah. Okay. So as far as I can figure out is that the business model for Philippe Village is not quite clear at the moment. It is very, very difficult to actually understand the core of it. It's also their tenanting strategy is not, well, I come from a property environment, so their tenanting strategy seems to me to be out of work with the context within which they're in, which is why you find that your rental as a person who's renting space in the containers is not only unaffordable, it's also difficult because you don't get the foot traffic that you need because of the design of the containers outside. Okay, that's the criticism that I've got. Trust me, I've spoken to the shareholders about this already, and they know my voice about it. So they are trying to change it. They've now changed their model. They only changed it in May this year. And I'm hoping that we can, well, one of the things that I really am helping with them with is how to build a bridge between themselves as shareholders of the entity called Philippe Village and the community within which they exist. And so this month, they've actually started to see how they can invest in community engagement in a socially innovative way. So that's one win already. The second one is also to talk to them about their tenanting strategy. To be able to say, if you have a tenanting strategy in a business that is operating in a context such as Philippe, you need to be able to be relevant. To be able to say to someone, don't just pay me rent, also pay me in kind in terms of what you do. So your agency as a business person who's operating within Philippe Village must be rewarded, going back to your question previously, by the fact that you actually are operating as a business there and you're trying to survive. So I'm not answering you about your rent. I'm just saying I'm also another tenant who's trying to change the way the system is operating. So we're trying to be as disruptive and innovative as possible, with obviously constructively within that space.
Thank you so much. And I think it's really interesting, because I think, when you got up, you said, how many of you are thinking about your own business? And you said, no half hands. And I think that's, even when you're trying to do things, that, you have to, you mentioned idealist, there's this idea of idealism. We want to make things better. And along the way, there's going to be challenges in that process. And I think, it's how do we make this work as best we can? And we're going to try stuff. And it's not always going to work 100%. And it's going, okay, well, that doesn't work. What do we do next to try to make this work? And there's that element of idealism, I think, that we've all sort of talked about. We want it to be better. We might need to break a few plates along the way, but we're going to try to make it better. Thank you so much to our panel. If we can give them a round of applause, please. Thank you so much. I thought that was really interesting. We are on the home stretch, I promise. The problem with an outside-looking venue is it gets dark, and I feel like people start to imagine being home. So we just have a quick closing from the Consulting Club. Imran's going to come up and give a quick closing. From my side, this isn't the closing, so you can't leave when I stop talking. I just wanted to say thank you so much to our panelists and our speakers, some of them had to leave early, to the Consulting Club for asking me to do this, and for also making it so easy for me to do this, because they put on such amazing events, and so I can just show up and read the lines that they've given me and hopefully not flub them too badly. And I think, like I said, for me, these public events are great, really rewarding for me personally in a very selfish way, to see our students doing these amazing things out there and trying to make a difference in tough circumstances. So I want to say thanks to the Consulting Club and my MBA students in general who are here. And with that, I'll turn over to Imran for a proper closing from the Consulting Club. Yeah, we got all the microphones now.
Thank you, Dr. London. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just before we go off, there's just a couple of acknowledgements we'd like to do and thank our partners for making this event today. First and foremost, we'd like to thank our esteemed speakers for making the time and providing the valuable insight to Herman J. David Bulelwa, sorry. Thank you very much. To Nthabiseng and Deloitte for our long-standing partnership with the Consulting Club and the school in general. Thank you very much for your support and for supporting this event as a sponsor. Thank you for your long-standing support of the Consulting Club. To our presenter, to our MCs, Alex from TEDx, thank you very much, and to you and your production team, as well as to Lisa Marie for all the back-end work in making sure today happened. To our esteemed Dr. Tim London for always being a valuable asset to us, a support, and for always willing to assist us in putting these events together. And to our partner teams, Workshop 17 and Laura for allowing us the magnificent use of these facilities and for the catering today. To our GSB partners, the Career Services team, Fiona, thank you very much for all your work in helping us while we've been trying to submit our assignments and getting all the little things done in the back end. To the GSB marketing team and Farad for putting up all the signage and for helping us with all the collateral for today. To our MBA director, Segrin, for being an advisor and a support to us. And to Streamlab and Antonio and his team for putting the production together today. Thank you very much, guys. I'd like to now invite you guys to the bar area where we will continue with the rest of the evening having snacks and networking. Thank you very much.